One finger points a flash of light, and the dark mage's trap instantly shatters. He collapses before even realizing he's dead, amidst the toxic mist and frantic soldiers. As the battlefield transforms into a tomb, Prince Errol breaks his ultimate taboo. A sliver of his forbidden power erupts not for the crown, nor for fame. He strikes for his sister, proving he isn't some lucky toddler, but a beast in child's skin. The boy everyone mocked, the one labeled as the Empire's most pathetic failure. He stayed silent through every insult, every Shadow Dweller's blade, and every palace humiliation. Dismissed as trash, he finally answers fate's threat with a single spectral bullet. Errol isn't a prodigy. He's a nightmare born from 10,000 previous deaths. Long before the title of prince, he was a veteran of 100 wars, reborn through countless cycles as a master swordsman and legendary knight. Following one savage execution, he awakens to a stunning woman gazing down. He tries to move, but his limbs fail. He isn't in a warrior's frame. He's a literal infant. One second he's a hero, the next he's wailing in a cradle. New life, same struggle. While they see a cute baby, Errol is calculating his survival. High-stakes nobility, zero safety, and a refusal to ever be powerless again. He's suffered too much. If this world demands power, he'll forge it in the shadows. Starting from the bassinet training, when the world thinks he's just sleeping, toddler Errol begins the impossible harvesting mana and refining forbidden techniques. Trapped in a nanny's embrace, yet harboring the soul of a battle-hardened god, he won't waste this life. Using ancient breathing, he begins circulating pure energy. Power flows effortlessly even during naps. He can't mask his wicked smirk. Pure euphoria. By age 3, his mana pool already rivals seasoned warriors. By 10, he's a walking nuke. No one in this era can touch him. The maid hears a strange hum, but Errol's innocent smile instantly kills her suspicion. He envisions ultimate dominance, craving the day he finally sits upon the throne. Only 5 months in, and his mana absorption is already breaking the world's laws. His muscles harden, and his core surges with power beyond any mortal peer. Mana gravitates toward him even as he crawls. The grind never stops. Soon he'll shatter every ceiling. But then gravity starts losing its grip. He floats upward, but it's just mom lifting him for playtime with a rattle. The toy shocks him, but he catches the flicker of sadness in his mother's eyes. He forces a giggle, dying inside from the sheer humiliation of acting like a baby. The women beam at his joy, completely fooled by his Oscar-worthy performance. Born with god-tier visuals, he low-key enjoys the constant praise and attention. Grateful for his mother's genes, he keeps up the act to keep her smiling. This peace is fleeting. Suddenly his face shifts, leaving his mother totally confused. He's starving. He summons fake tears to signal for his next meal. Milk time. But as he drinks, the conversation turns toward their drying bank account. He needs nutrition, but their gold is vanishing. His mother looks utterly helpless. The budget's been slashed. Raising a royal child is becoming a financial nightmare. His mother is skipping meals just to keep the household afloat. It's a matter of life or death. Errol realizes this isn't just a minor setback. She puts on a brave face, ready to starve so he can thrive. Anxiety kicks in. His mother is just a low-ranking concubine with no safety net. Even after birthing a prince, she remained a powerless ghost within these cold walls. Royalty meant nothing without influence. They were completely abandoned. If he didn't act soon, a cruel, frozen fate would surely devour them both. Our hero refused to roll over. He wouldn't let his story end as a tragic footnote in some forgotten cradle. She was even denied an audience with the king. Staff dismissed her, claiming His Majesty was far too busy for concubines. Suddenly, the pieces clicked. He finally realized where his mother had been heading during those long, lonely carriage rides. She was desperately begging for the king's help, only to be met with constant rejection. No matter how ruthless a ruler, treating the mother of your child like trash is beyond disgusting. Why crush her soul when the nobles already abused her? Indifference is one thing, but this was pure malice. Tears of frustration finally spilled from the young prince's eyes. The nanny tucked him into his mother's embrace. Even trapped in a tiny body, his soul burned to save her. His mind raced for a solution. They just had to survive the biting frost of this one winter. Poverty was their greatest enemy, and the plummeting temperatures meant heating costs would soon bleed them dry. He racked his brain for any advantage. Then, like a bolt of lightning, a crazy idea finally struck him. If coal and diamonds are both just carbon, he could literally manufacture wealth from the very fireplace. If gold was out of reach, he'd just create jewels. One problem, his toddler legs weren't built for secret missions. He was stuck in his crib, but he had a secret weapon, the massive mana pool swirling inside his frame. He could levitate, flight would take him anywhere. Plus, he noticed the palace's fuel supplies were pathetically low anyway. The fireplace was overflowing with raw potential. He just needed one massive surge of power to transmute the entire pile. Time was ticking. Crouched in the shadows, he channeled intense thermal energy, generating the crushing pressure of 1,000 mountains. He poured every ounce of his mana into the coal. Exhaustion meant nothing as long as his mother survived. He gripped his fading consciousness, forcing his internal core to pump out even more power. He refused to break. If this gamble paid off, the sorrow would finally leave his mother's eyes. That was his only wish. He just wanted her to smile again. Suddenly, smoke erupted from the stove. The miracle had been forged. A dazzling, shimmering diamond lay amidst the ashes. Now, he just had to find a way to let them discover it. Success tasted sweet. When the nanny walked in the next morning, her jaw dropped at what she found in his crib. Confusion washed over her. How did a baby climb out of such a high bed? Had he really spent the night on the floor? As she scooped up his soot-covered body, she realized the palace was looking more like a neglected ruin every single day. It was a miracle he hadn't caught hypothermia, but the prince didn't care about the cold. His mother's safety was his only priority. That's when the nanny noticed him chewing on something strange. Panicked, she begged him to spit it out. But when the little hero finally opened his mouth, a massive diamond glistened on his tongue. She was baffled. Where on earth did a baby find a king's ransom? The logic didn't matter. Selling this single stone would bring in enough gold to change their lives forever. This was their salvation. She squeezed him tight, praising his luck, unaware of the genius behind it. Supply wagons finally breached the gates. Heaps of firewood and food arrived, all thanks to that one shimmering stone. That single diamond's price tag secured 5 years of luxury. Yet a tiny seed of doubt lingered in their minds. What if someone came looking for it? But this wing of the castle had been a ghost town for a century. Since no one had set foot here for decades, they decided it was a divine gift sent from the heavens. His mother was overjoyed, certain a miracle had occurred. The prince simply gave her dress, a playful tug. It was his silent promise, just wait until I grow up. He would tear down every obstacle in her path. He visualized his future self standing tall as her protector, even if he was currently stuck in diapers. He vowed to make the world acknowledge his name one day. For now, the palace stayed toasty all winter. The feast was endless. The nannies fussed over her, insisting she focus on her health instead of her fears. Joy returned to the manor. New staff arrived, and old friends who'd been fired were finally welcomed back. Best of all, the shadow of sorrow had vanished. His mother was glowing, her radiant smile finally returning. She was finally living in comfort. Fast forward 1 year, and the nannies were already picking out the prince's suit. The outfits were decent, but his mother insisted on something formal. Our hero, he hated every single option. Seriously, he loathed these wardrobe changes. What insane gala required this level of exhaustion? Why couldn't they let a prince chill? Frustrated, he collapsed and wailed on the floor. They quickly hushed and rocked him to sleep. Finally, he savored the blissful silence alone. Meanwhile, Nanny beamed with pride. Today, the Empire would finally meet its hidden prince. His official introduction had begun. Our hero sat there absolutely floored by the news. Had the moment arrived, his mother remained firm. He deserved recognition regardless of rumors. Royal blood was undeniable, making his birthday the ultimate stage. The Emperor had to show. She banked on it, he couldn't hide forever. Nanny whispered that fathers are often cold. Cold distances are standard for newborn royals. Our hero froze. Was he really a year older? A massive gala for a literal baby, overkill much, yet his mother was glowing. This banquet would cement his royal claim. Imperial law was finally backing him up. Errol felt his stomach churn with nerves. Still, he flashed a perfectly crafted smile. Excitement bubbled within, but doubt lingered. Would the high-ranking nobles even bother appearing? Honestly, he just wanted to spot his father, the legendary man he'd never actually met. The hall surged with elite guests and servants. He couldn't help calculating the massive bill. Financials aside, the spectacle was undeniable. Everyone looked like they stepped off a runway. Was this standard banquet attire? It wasn't bad, but the sea of strangers felt suffocating. He'd never seen such a crowd. Sensing his panic, Mom whispered that everything was fine. "You're the star here," she reminded him. Meanwhile, the nobles were already throwing shade. He brushed them off. Their opinions were irrelevant. He was searching for one specific person. Where was the Emperor? He needed to stare that deadbeat dad right in the eyes. He had to see the man who sired a son, then vanished completely. He just needed a glimpse. Suddenly, the heavy doors swung open. The VIPs arrived. The main event was here, the imperial family. He immediately gripped his mother's gown. Was that the acting empress and her brood? Their sheer arrogance gave them away instantly. She carried herself with lethal grace. Her children were clearly cut from the same cloth. The eldest stood front and center. Their expressions were chillingly serious, almost grim. They walked past his mother like she was invisible. Remarkably, she didn't even flinch. Their petty disrespect didn't faze her. She just softly asked if he was feeling okay. "It'll be over soon," she promised. Then he noticed her focus shift toward the entrance. There he was, his father. Power radiated from the man like a crushing physical weight. The chattering nobles fell dead silent. Why was everyone bowing like he was a god? Instinctively, our hero felt that suffocating pressure. Was his father even looking at him? Or was he glaring at Mom? He really wished this reincarnation included a mind-reading cheat. How clutch would that be? Soon, guests began flooding him with lavish congratulatory gifts. To them, his presence was a spectacle. Then the royals stepped up to congratulate him. They didn't mask their pure disgust. Seeing that open contempt made our hero's blood boil. He squirmed in Mom's arms, itching to smack that arrogant woman. How dare she? It felt like they weren't even human to her. Everyone here seemed utterly rotten inside. He thought about exposing them with a scream, but he wouldn't embarrass his mother. He played the quiet, harmless infant. In this den of hypocrites, that was the play. He just wanted to escape and sleep. But then a young girl caught his eye. Probably another one of the Emperor's daughters. She looked so tiny and innocent. By then, his mother was looking elsewhere. Finally, the chaotic banquet began to fade out. Both he and his mother exhaled in relief. But the drama was far from over. The Empress glided toward his mother, crediting their effortless arrival solely to the boy's presence. Beside her stood the Crown Prince. Errol wondered, was this genuine praise, or just a veiled boast about her own son? Classic Empress behavior. She continued her act, cooing about how adorable Errol looked. He's the spitting image of his mother, she remarked. To Errol, those words felt like ice. She was the architect of their pain. Who else would gut their budget so mercilessly? They'd been forced to incinerate furniture just to stay warm. His outfits were literally patchwork rags stitched by loyal servants. Yet the Empress dared wish him a long life. She dropped hollow pleasantries, then left with a faint smirk. Suddenly, the vibe changed. His mother froze. The Emperor himself had appeared. He casually asked if she'd adjusted to palace life yet. Her polite response was a transparent lie, but who could blame her? The Emperor's sudden interest stunned Errol. He only wanted one thing, the financial support a father of his status should have provided years ago. Errol unleashed a sudden piercing wail. Intrigued, the Emperor reached out to hold the son he'd ignored for an entire year. He leaned in. The Emperor looked baffled when Errol instantly silenced his cries. His other heirs usually screamed uncontrollably. Instead, Errol flashed a dazzling grin, hoping to absolutely floor the old man with his unexpected charm. The Emperor was visibly impressed. This tiny child showed zero fear in the presence of the most powerful man. Errol began squirming silently, demanding to be released. He wants to walk, his mother explained nervously. A 1-year-old walking impossible. Yet, at that precise second, Errol found his feet and took a step. Errol knew the spotlight was his. It was time for a show. The banquet hall erupted into absolute chaos and delight. Their little prince had finally walked. Even the Emperor watched with keen interest, realizing this boy was special. But Errol wasn't finished. He had to prove he was nothing like the other royal heirs. He'd demonstrate his uniqueness before the whole court. He was Prince Errol after all. But then he grabbed the table. He lunged for support, sending the entire table tipping. Gourmet dishes and fine wine came crashing down in a chaotic mess. Shards of glass and food splattered everywhere. But Errol didn't panic. In fact, this was the plan. This was the main event. Everyone was so obsessed with his first steps, they missed his calculated move. Everything was moving according to script. He'd chosen the perfect moment to execute his little accident. For a final dramatic touch, he let out a sob. He was just a vulnerable child after all. The Emperor snatched him up, checking for injuries. Aside from wine-stained fabric, the boy seemed physically fine. He obviously needed a fresh outfit. Linka stepped forward to take him, but the Emperor held up a hand. As the soaked outer layer peeled back, the tattered rags underneath were exposed for the entire court to see. Why was a prince wearing garbage? The crowd whispered in shock until the Emperor's voice thundered for silence. He demanded an explanation. How were his own flesh and blood living in such absolute squalor? The truth, that morning while being dressed, Errol had channeled every ounce of his hidden power. He'd strained the threads until they snapped. Shredding the already weak fabric to make it look like trash was easy. If he had actual muscles, he wouldn't need magic. But what mattered was dragging the palace's rot into the light. The scheme worked. The Emperor pivoted to Errol's mother, demanding she explain this absolute disgrace. How was this possible? Was maintaining royal dignity truly that difficult? His mother stood there, trembling in fear. Realizing she was too terrified to speak, the Emperor turned his icy gaze toward his treasurer, Gina. He roared, demanding the exact figures allocated for the concubines' estates. How could things have decayed this far? Gina stuttered, claiming the budget was meant to be split evenly, and that the orders were followed to the letter. Define evenly, the Emperor hissed. He demanded the official financial ledger immediately. Errol watched closely. His father was actually furious. He couldn't wait to see the fraudulent numbers in that report. His mother pleaded that it was just a mistake reaching for Errol, but he knew this was their endgame. Tension choked the room as the secretary laid the financial documents before the ruler. Everyone held their breath. The Emperor scanned the pages, his eyes widening in pure disbelief at the truth. In a fit of rage, he incinerated the papers with raw power. Errol was shocked he'd assumed the Emperor was complicit. This was the Empress's handiwork alone. The Emperor whirled toward her, demanding to know why the treasury was bleeding dry. While the former rulers and low-ranking consorts were left with scraps, the Empress played a single dangerous card. Donning a mask of pure shock, she feigned innocence. But the emperor's face twisted into something truly chilling as he demanded answers. Did she really expect him to buy that act? The palace budget was her domain, and her signature was on everything. The crown prince lunged to his mother's defense. He scrambled forward, desperately pleading that this was all just a massive misunderstanding. He swore his mother was incapable of such cruelty. Yet the emperor's gaze only grew colder, cutting through the boy's words. Intent matters nothing, the emperor growled. A leader is judged by the failures of their house, and her negligence had crossed the line. Because of her, his younger son was left starving in rags. The eldest prince shot a look at our hero, his eyes drowning in guilt. Our hero loathed that pathetic look. It was proof enough that the eldest son lacked the iron will of his father. He had none of the empress's cunning either. Then the emperor turned the heat up, asking if the boy truly believed his mother was blameless. Looming over the empress, the emperor whispered how deeply she had failed him. Suddenly, our hero's mother rushed forward, begging for mercy. She insisted the blame rested on her shoulders alone. The emperor's brow furrowed, genuinely confused by her sudden sacrificial act. By carrying the royal bloodline, she was a true member of the imperial family. The lady's face turned a deep shade of crimson. The emperor gently took her hand, reminding her of her true worth. But that tender moment was like a slap to the empress's face. Fury flared in the empress's eyes. She barked an order to hunt down the culprits immediately, while the emperor demanded a brutal resolution. He warned that such a disgrace would never be tolerated twice. The empress bowed her head, her fingers trembling with suppressed rage. She swore it would never happen again. But the emperor's final warning was chilling next time the axe would fall on her neck. She sputtered endless apologies, vowing to find a scapegoat to punish. Deep down, she still couldn't fathom why he was this livid. She then turned to our hero's mother, feigning total ignorance and asking how she could possibly make things right. Our hero saw right through the performance. Meanwhile, his mother fussed, insisting that no real harm had been done. She claimed the empress was innocent, but our hero was baffled. The venomous snake standing before them was the one pulling all the strings. The empress gave her word, but she didn't even have the grace to look guilty. She had every woman in the palace cowed. And just like that, the birthday chaos ended. The missing funds were swept under the rug, and the empress walked away unscathed. A low-ranking noble family was served up as the sacrificial lamb. Without a trial, they were hauled off and executed in cold blood. Palace rumors claimed those poor souls actually confessed before the end, but everyone knew how those confessions were forced out. Nobody could explain how a minor family blew through that much gold, yet the court was just happy to move on. Only our hero knew the true monsters were still lurking in the palace. The case was slammed shut, buried forever. The injustice burned in his soul. One day he'd make them bleed for this. But for now, he was stuck in a crib. Ambition was great, but his tiny stomach was screaming for food. So naturally, he let out a piercing baby wail. He was being spoon-fed now, which wasn't half bad. Still, he needed to start training this weak, tiny vessel as soon as possible. He was stuck in this infant body for the long haul. After plotting his next move, he realized there was only one path forward. Meal finished, he drifted into a deep sleep. When he finally blinked awake, a mysterious carriage was pulling up to the gates. He watched as a group stepped out onto the gravel. He had a front row seat only because he'd literally levitated to the window. His nanny was out cold, giving him a chance to use his powers. Suddenly, 3 pairs of footsteps echoed in the hallway. It was his mother, accompanied by another adult and a child. Panic surged through him. If his nanny woke up now, his secret was out. His supernatural gift would be exposed to the world. He dove back toward his crib just as the door creaked open. The guests entered to find him playfully tugging on the sleeping nanny's cheeks. His mother gasped, telling him to play nice with her. She scolded him, saying his nanny deserved respect and affection. Startled awake, the nanny realized they had high-ranking company. The nanny scrambled to offer a proper greeting. But the elegant visitor just laughed it off, dismissing the formalities entirely. She admitted she'd arrived unannounced. Our hero recognized that face immediately. It was the high-ranking consort Phanelia. The staff fretted over not giving her a grand welcome. However, the mistress had a very different reason for being there. She requested a private audience with our hero's mother. Despite her confusion, his mother could tell this wasn't just a casual visit. Expecting a disaster, she nearly choked on her tea when the woman spoke. Phanelia bowed, apologizing for her behavior at the royal banquet. She seemed truly haunted by her actions during Ariel's birthday bash. After all, her family had been legends during the Great Continental War. They were the undisputed heroes of the battlefield, their names synonymous with the Empire's ultimate triumph. But that legend was dying. With no male heirs to carry the torch, their prestige was crumbling under the weight of palace gossip. After years of financial ruin, his mother suspected a family crisis had prompted this sudden, desperate visit. Drowning in debt, Phanelia confessed, the Empress's shadow loomed over their family's tragic downfall. Framed for embezzlement, she offered a heavy purse, though it barely scratched their massive debt. Guilt consumed her. She begged for understanding even if forgiveness remained a distant, impossible dream. Whether hated by one or all, she accepted her fate. Suddenly, the door creaked wide open. Seeing Phanelia's young daughter, his mother realized this was a desperate mother shielding her child. Fearing imperial wrath, Fenelia sought safety. His mother gently refused the coins, offering kindness instead. Sensing Fenelia's innocence, his mother showed mercy. "Don't pity me," Fenelia whispered, her voice trembling. Denying any pity, his mother stood firm. There was no reason for them to be enemies. Without a hint of resentment, she pushed the gold back, choosing solidarity over petty revenge. "Use this for your daughter," she insisted. "She deserves a gift in these dark times." Having served the Empress once, she understood the brutal reality of their palace's budget cuts. Ariel froze in shock. The mystery of his mother's isolation finally clicked, making him squirm. Heartbroken for her, Ariel's frantic movements baffled his nurse, who checked if he was okay. Masking his inner turmoil, the prince flashed a grin. The nanny assumed it was baby tantrums. Thinking he was just fussy, she left with Kanya. Finally, Ariel was left alone to plot. Burning his stamina, Ariel eavesdropped on the heavy secrets being shared in the next room. His mother warned that the Empress's tyranny was inescapable, a shadow darkening every palace corner. Until Ariel came of age, she vowed to shield him, her resolve hardening like cold steel. She extended a hand to Fenelia, not just friendship, but a clandestine, life-altering survival pact. A secret sisterhood was born. If one fell, the others would be there to catch them. This union was their only hope. Ariel watched, stunned by his mother's hidden sharp intellect. He had underestimated her. She wasn't just surviving, she was playing a high-stakes chess game. She knew the coming storm. Before Ariel could process this, the little girl suddenly loomed over. Praying she'd ignore him, his pleas went unanswered as she scrambled onto his tiny bed. She treated his face like putty. Ariel struggled in his crib, desperately seeking a daring escape. She giggled at his resistance, declaring him adorable. At that moment, Ariel knew he was finished. As the nanny invited her back, the princess enthusiastically agreed. Ariel's nightmare was just beginning. She promised to return constantly. Fast forward, and the prince had reached 30 months old. His third birthday neared. Time was sprinting, leaving Ariel wondering how he'd grown so fast. Normalcy felt miles away. Memories of his 45th life haunted him, a cycle he hated repeating. He hadn't expected another round. Then the princess stormed in, targeting him like a guided missile. Ariel scrambled for cover, but she found him instantly. He was already drained, his soul tired. She demanded hide and seek, bolting toward the garden before he could even utter a refusal. Outside, it was clear that since that first meeting, her visits had become a daily chaos. With the nanny's blessing, this became their routine. Perhaps this was the path to true alliance. Kanya boasted about being the best sister ever. He was tiny, but she promised her protection. "When you're big, you'll protect me," she chirped, making him vow to come whenever she called. Ariel couldn't fathom why this princess was so obsessed with a baby like him. She confessed the truth, playing with Ariel was way better than hanging with Meryl or Leonidas. He was her top choice for fun. Ariel could only offer a weak, super awkward chuckle. She'd regret this later. Suddenly, she snatched him up, determined to carry him like a doll. Her help felt more like a chokehold. Ariel gasped for air, his dignity completely crushed. He prayed for a savior, and fate answered. A maid rushed in her face, pale with worry. "You'll hurt him," she cried gently, prying the prince away from Kanya's suffocating royal grip. A child like that shouldn't carry such weight. Urel whispered a prayer to fate for sparing his life. Princess Kanya screamed in fury, demanding playtime. Her maid calmly nudged her toward a canvas instead. "Fairy tales are boring," Kanya groaned, utterly fed up. She didn't want stories, she wanted a sword. Watching her mimic Kyle with a stick, our hero instantly spotted her flawed balance and off-center gravity. Zero balance, even with a wooden rod. Since swordsmanship was his lifelong passion, he couldn't help but notice. He missed the blade dearly. Meanwhile, Kanya imagined her foe's defeat and boldly proclaimed her victory. The maid's words stung. If Kyle and Leonard could train, why couldn't she? The maid's answer was cold. Princesses must keep their hands clean. It's tradition, she insisted, ending the debate before it even began. Be graceful and feminine. Then, panic struck. The maid's sword was gone, snatched right into Kanya's tiny hands. Screaming that it was a real blade, the maid chased Kanya. As the princess babbled about grand swordplay, she begged for the blade back, pleading with her to use a smaller, safer trainer instead. Our hero watched quietly amused. Little Kanya was growing on him. By now, he had turned 5. 5 meant horseback lessons. Still, just a kid, he was asked if he wanted to mount a real steed. The prince preferred his safer toy horse. Annie sighed, realizing not every boy was born to be a rider, or a swordsman. Fearing he'd be an outcast, she begged for interest. Our hero just flashed a smirk. "Forget those cliches," he said. "The knight on a white horse is dead." Annie absolutely hated that logic. She was powerless to stop him. Meanwhile, he reflected on the countless lives he had already endured. Civility wasn't his forte. He only knew how to make others kneel through sheer, masterful swordplay. He'd crushed armies and mastered magic. Every trial had forged his skills into something near divine. With nothing left to master, he listened as his nanny lectured him on hard work and productivity. The moment she left, he collapsed onto his bed. Work is for losers, he thought. Not for him. He whined and put on a pathetic act, but deep down, one truth was shining brighter than ever. He simply refused to study. At age 5, when kids should be sponges, he was a brick wall. Challenged on his lack of curiosity, he admitted there was plenty to learn, he just didn't care. His apathy was so deep, someone joked he spoke like a man who'd lived 100 lives. That hit too close to home. Startled, he quickly masked it and leaned back, playing it cool. He muttered about feeling suffocated. He was sick of repeating the same basic lessons over and over. Tired of the loop, he was dragged to the library. By imperial law, formal education began now. At age 5, the nightmare started. He stared at the endless shelves, baffled by the sheer volume. Was he supposed to read all this? Instead of opening a book, he just started spinning it. Spinning was the only fun part. "Read it, don't play with it," she scolded, but he didn't care. Our hero grabbed more volumes, stacking them into tiny forts, driving his nanny to the edge. She reminded him that millions would kill for this education while he was treating it like trash. "Respect the books," she barked. He sat up straight, but his mind was already plotting an escape. Back in his room, he used a skill perfected in this life. He dropped to the floor instantly. He wailed about his hatred for studying, but his mother's entrance killed the performance in a heartbeat. Forced to study, he realized the irony. The more genius he displayed, the more danger he invited. As a concubine's son, being a prodigy was a death sentence in this cutthroat imperial court. They'd eliminate him faster than he could blink. Fate had cast him in a very dangerous role. He decided to play dumb, drooling on his desk, while his nanny begged him to stay focused. He wasn't just doing this for himself. His mother's safety rested entirely on his shoulders. He lazily asked if studying was mandatory. His nanny warned that failure would only bring his mother grief. Breaking his mother's heart was the one thing he refused to do in this new life. He'd study anything except swordsmanship. Mastering the blade would just put a target on his back. No magic either. But without power or steel, what kind of legend would he eventually become? 1 week later, his worst fears materialized when Nanny announced the arrival of a high-level magic instructor. Our hero panicked instantly. Becoming a mage was a nightmare scenario. Showing high potential was a literal death sentence. Great power meant becoming a political target. After years of secret cultivation, his internal energy was already overflowing. He scrambled for a way to mask his aura, but Nanny dragged him toward the hall without a second thought. "Relax, it won't hurt," she promised. But stepping inside, he found the master frozen in sheer wide-eyed disbelief. Our hero watched the mage's mana pulse like a neon sign, shocked his own perception was already this sharp. The master approached, trembling as he sensed something rare. Expectations in the room reached a fever pitch immediately. They prayed for a legendary prodigy to save the throne. However, the expert's final verdict was a total bombshell. He couldn't detect a single flicker of mana. It defied all logic, yet every scan yielded the same result: total emptiness. Inside, our hero smirked. Of course, the expert found nothing. He'd planned this concealment perfectly. He'd manually sealed his mana circuits, crushing his energy into a tiny speck while purging the excess power. Relief washed over him as the mage fell for the bait. If it's invisible, it simply doesn't exist. The detection spell failed completely. But this victory came with a massive catch that he didn't see coming. If magic was a bust, the prince was destined for the sword. Martial arts was now his only path. Even peasants had a spark, yet the prince was a void. Our hero questioned if he'd overplayed his hand. Seeing his mother's crushed expression hurt his heart, but he knew this charade was a necessary, bitter evil. The world had to see a fragile weakling. Silently, he begged his mother to forgive his fake incompetence. Next up was a personal fencing master. Just another day and another chance to act like a total loser. "Train hard, and you'll be like me," the knight boasted. Our hero just analyzed his new teacher coldly. A 25-year-old amateur. Compared to our hero's 100 lifetimes of war, this guy was a mere puppy. He'd survived hellish battlefields and cosmic horrors. This knight's experience was a joke to a seasoned regressor. How could this novice teach a god of war? Regardless, he masked his pride and asked to begin. He played the eager student while hiding his lethality. "Trust the grind," the knight preached with supreme confidence. "Hard work pays off," the knight cheered, starting with fundamentals. But our hero's mind drifted to Princess Kanya. Kanya trained with heavy weights, but the knight dismissed it as family tradition. Our hero felt utterly lost. Sir Randall droned on about balance and flow, treating the prince like he was made of fragile glass. He started with a baby drill, standing straight on a wooden stump. "Easy does it," Randall encouraged him. Our hero instantly faked a panic attack, wobbling like jelly and crying that the height was terrifying him. He acted like a puppet with cut strings. Flexibility drills followed, and he failed those on purpose too. Exhausted, the knight finally handed him a sword. But even with a blade, our hero played the klutz. He missed every single target. Looking up with puppy eyes, he asked, "Am I just naturally bad?" "Don't sweat it," Your Highness, Randall sighed. "We've only just started. We'll fix this through pure repetition." Mid-conversation, our hero's sixth sense tingled. Someone was lurking in the shadows, observing his every clumsy move. If he played the loser well enough, the vultures would leave. Predictably, the palace gossip mill exploded. Soon the headline was everywhere. The prince is monoless. It became the empire's favorite juicy scandal. Spies reported he was a fragile weakling who couldn't even stand on a stump without trembling in fear. No magic, no sword skills, they sneered. The empress beamed with joy, falling right into his trap. Low expectations meant lower security, exactly what he needed. During lunch, he checked on his next tutor's arrival. He was now officially the trash prince, and top-tier teachers were already ghosting his royal invitations. Only one man accepted the lost cause. Gamel Pernia arrived that afternoon to begin the next lesson, a language specialist. Our hero read the man's face instantly. He was clearly here against his own will. A heavy stack of ancient dusty texts slammed onto the table with a loud, discouraging thud. Basic grammar. Finish it tonight, Gamel barked. We're moving to advanced topics tomorrow. Try to keep up. Sensing something off, our hero maintained his lazy facade. He couldn't quite read this new teacher's endgame. Why the rush with zero interaction? It felt like Gamel was talking at him, not to him. Don't let his youth fool you. Across countless reincarnations, our protagonist had mastered more languages than most could ever dream of. His linguistic talent was unparalleled. To kick things off, he simply grabbed a few grammar guides and some foreign novels. The world was vast, but since languages share core structures, conquering them was just a race against the clock. He spent the entire night devouring texts. By sunrise, his tutor was skeptical if he had actually absorbed it all. He confirmed he was ready. Despite his tutor's shock, the prince found his own imperial tongue more complex than foreign dialects. The teacher presented a book for him to read. Normally, seeing an infant tackle complex literature would be an impossible feat. But as he began reciting fluently, the tutor was left speechless. This child was breaking every known limit of logic. Realizing a star student would skyrocket his own status, the teacher prepared to market the boy as a legendary genius. The empire was already reeling because the prince possessed zero magic. He was essentially a blank slate in a magical world. How did a magicless boy master languages in 48 hours? Everyone began hailing him as a genius. The hype was easy to track. After a few drinks, his teacher started spilling secrets about the miracles he had witnessed. Word eventually reached the emperor's ears. He realized that if his son could not wield a blade, perhaps scholarship was his destiny. He truly believed in his son's brilliance, while his consort could only sigh with a heavy heart and lingering regret. Feeling she had failed the emperor, she watched her son's transformation, questioning if her parenting was even working anymore. Sensing her distress, the emperor approached his concubine. He saw greatness where she saw worry as the boy was becoming elite. He asked if she was truly scared, because in his eyes their son was evolving into a masterpiece of a man. Meanwhile, our hero was playing the long game. He would reveal his wonders in small doses to keep the kingdom hooked. For now, he would just kick back and exploit the perks of his new genius title, while still a carefree child. Days later, elite knights flooded the court. It was a clear power move by the emperor to secure his son's safety. Since our hero lacked combat skills, he needed a shield. He appreciated the fatherly love until a chaotic noise broke his focus. Nannies were hauling in massive crates. As our hero watched the heavy lifting, his mother explained these were royal gifts. He was stunned by the sheer volume of presents his father had sent. The hallway was overflowing with imperial treasures, but inside it was just piles of jewelry. While precious, our hero only cared about the hidden stats or magical buffs. Unfortunately, these artifacts were mental drains. Using them would likely leave the user completely burned out and exhausted. The nannies were obsessed, gushing over the elegant designs. To them, these were just shiny trinkets to show off. He could feel the mana pulsing within the gems, but they were useless to him. He considered gifting the lot to his sister. Princess Kanya had been overworking herself in training, so our hero decided to cheer her up with some royal jewelry. He asked his mother for permission to share a piece with Kanya. She did not mind, seeing no harm in his generosity. She wondered what he even saw in the princess. He could not reveal the truth, so he just said she was strong. The castle was buzzing with joy. The emperor's grand gesture had turned the prince into the center of the world. Our hero sat for a feast surrounded by gourmet pastries crafted by the realm's top chefs. One bite was all it took. Everything tasted like cardboard. To him, the finest desserts were completely devoid of flavor. Nothing was actually sweet. When his nanny offered to bring the chef, he shook his head and made a weirder request. He demanded an alchemist. The nanny froze while our hero was daydreaming about the heavenly taste of ice-cold cola. He needed science to recreate modern snacks. Of course, since she could not read his mind, she just stood there confused. She asked why he needed a scientist. He realized explaining the concept of fizz to a medieval nanny was a lost cause. A 5-year-old demanding a lab was insane. But without an alchemist, those nostalgic flavors from his past life were unreachable. Synthesizing soda in a medieval world was impossible, yet he craved that icy carbonated hit more than anything. How was he going to fix this? Since he was a genius, he figured he would just invent the technology himself. He bolted toward the door, claiming he needed to study. His nanny stood there completely blindsided by his sudden motivation. She never expected such academic drive from him. Our hero knew cooking was just chemistry, and he needed a pro. 3 years flew by. Now 8, our hero sat at a summit where officials debated massive infrastructure projects. They asked for his input on building trade bridges. He praised the plan, then pivoted to question the original architect. A man stepped forward, beaming with pride, and claimed the blueprints as his own personal masterpiece. He interrogated the crowd for the bridge's architect. One man stepped forward, proudly boasting of his master design. Anticipating a compliment, the architect's face fell as the prince's expression turned ice cold. Deliver this garbage again, and you're finished. It looks decent, but winter snow will pile up. The entire structure would snap. This design fails under concentrated pressure, making it a death trap. You've prioritized flashy aesthetics over people's lives. The architect obsessed over vanity, neglecting basic safety. Functionality was tossed aside for flair. Fix this immediately. Redo every single calculation right now. With god-tier intellect, his workload was exploding. He was now schooling veteran ministers using futuristic tech. Wisdom from past incarnations fueled his progress. He had already spent lifetimes mastering political chess. No time for breaks. This was his stage to shine, so he tackled the next crisis instantly. Stepping out, he caught a maid's eye. She whispered, "Look, it's the silver-haired sage." That title hit him like a truck. Being called a sage was definitely not on his radar. Who told you that? Stop it right now. The maid nearly blurted it again, her mouth twitching. She bit her tongue. Cringe factor aside, the public had already dubbed him with that ridiculous title. Utterly embarrassing. His mother searched frantically, until the nanny revealed he'd headed to see the emperor. He sought an imperial audience to master alchemy. En route, the prince contemplated his next power move. The emperor's swift approval proved his influence. His dedication to the realm was finally paying off. Despite multiple lifetimes meeting, his father was still nerve-wracking. He needed to be smooth and incredibly persuasive. He had to play it cool. Entering the study, he prepared to mask his true ambitions perfectly. Strengthening the nation is my goal. Since swords and magic aren't my forte, alchemy is my path. Logic was his weapon. The emperor watched, impressed by the mature, calculating mind inside this young child. Very well, tutors will be summoned. The prince had already calculated every step of this request. His dream was manifesting. Once news broke of Prince Ael's search, the alchemist community went wild. Applicants swarmed the palace for historical glory. To filter them, a brutal imperial test was announced. Task Forge, a mirror reflecting light to the horizon. One master eventually nailed it with 0 flaws. This legendary alchemist was Darman Longet. Our hero grinned. The right player had joined the game. Expecting a fossilized scholar, he was met by a young prodigy sporting some seriously wild hair. Is that color real? Armin laughed, explaining that years of inhaling toxic fumes had bleached his hair. Constant chemical exposure turned it snow white. The prince wondered how this guy was even still alive. Surviving those toxins was a miracle. Darman appeared composed, but a darker intensity flickered in his eyes. Alchemy is a brutal mistress. One slip-up leads to death, and the researcher bears the blame alone. There are no safety nets here. Darman warned him this path is paved with extreme lethal danger. This science demands a high price, but the prince had already calculated the stakes. No turning back. Forget cheap party tricks like making gold. I'm here for high-level metallurgy and advanced metal alloys. I need materials that redefine construction. Let's create the strongest alloys the world has ever seen. Darman was electrified. The whispers were true. This prince was built different, a true visionary genius. Seeing a future emperor, Darman knelt, locked eyes with the boy, and pledged his absolute loyalty. I will teach you everything. Days later, Darman grew suspicious of the boy's insane learning speed. Have you studied this before? The prince froze. Was his god-tier knowledge becoming way too obvious? I've just skimmed some books, he lied smoothly. Darman beamed, mesmerized by such raw, natural talent. The genius rumors were officially confirmed. Our hero exhaled. His secret past lives remained safely hidden. Lab sessions stretched deep into the night. Armin remained a shadow, perfecting the prince's experimental techniques. He mastered lead extraction rapidly. Each session pushed his understanding of chemical bonds to a new level. Scientific principles hadn't changed much across lifetimes. He was simply bridging the gap between worlds effortlessly. The plan was flawless until a bold petition from the prince landed on the emperor's desk. He demanded 4 more master alchemists. The emperor instantly summoned the nation's elite to fulfill it. Anxiety rippled through the servants. What was this tiny genius planning with an entire squad of alchemists? Even as research gutted the imperial coffers and public anger simmered, the emperor clung to his son's vision. He recalled the boy's unwavering conviction, knowing this gamble was for the empire's glory. Meanwhile, our hero approached the alchemists. With a bizarre request, engineer a legendary beverage using alchemy. No one could fathom why a genius would choose this. Why waste such elite talent on a mere drink? Disappointment clouded the lab, especially after abandoning their prestigious projects. But our hero dropped a bombshell. They'd be showered in gold whether the experiment succeeded or failed. That bag changed the energy instantly. The alchemists locked in. Some had heard of fizzy brews, but wondered if the prince wanted a signature blend. He knew greed and fame were the ultimate motivators to move them. The race was on to craft an elite soda. Days later, rare mineral water arrived from distant lands. For testing, one alchemist scoffed, doubting the murky liquid was even fit for human consumption. However, our hero wasn't satisfied with nature's work. If natural springs failed, they would manufacture the water itself. The alchemists were floored. The concept of creating artificial water sounded like pure madness to them. He handed over his personal blueprints, a revolutionary theory, challenging them to perfect the impossible formula. Confident in his elite team, he left them to cook. It was finally time to turn theory into reality. But was 1 week enough for a miracle, even under pressure? He knew heavy funding was the ultimate catalyst. Within 7 days, he summoned the team for a world-shaking revelation. He declared a new era, carbonated water, the literal sparkling fuel of imperial progress. Realizing a true soda replica was too complex, he pivoted to refreshing sparkling water. The skeptics remained confused. Who would drink this? He urged them to trust the vision, suggesting they mix it with juice or spirits. He originally craved a Coca-Cola, but settled for a realistic masterpiece. They prepped several prototypes for a blind taste test. The second he spiked the water with lemon, the flavor profile absolutely ascended. The room was stunned. The alchemist couldn't believe the hype. This prince's lemonade sold out instantly. Exploding in popularity far beyond the borders, it became the ultimate status symbol, a liquid luxury reserved for the elite. No one believed the useless prince was the mastermind behind the craze. Everyone craved a sip of that legendary spark. In the north, the powerful Count Dement demanded the truth behind the creator. He doubted a prince could possess such business prowess. His secretary confirmed that Ariel himself was the architect of this empire-wide boom. The drink had officially revitalized the entire economy. Rumors swirled of literal wagons of gold flowing toward the concubine's palace every single day. The Count realized he'd played himself, underestimating the boy as just another royal brat. Had he known, he would have moved sooner. Now only regret remained. Meanwhile, the princess turned 16. She was a prodigy with a blade, and even the prince found her combat prowess genuinely terrifying. The maids gossiped that her fencing was flawlessly polished, and they weren't exaggerating one bit. She gapped every boy her age. She was adorable, but clearly needed a break from the grind. Over tea, she mentioned how his name was on everyone's lips. His miracle water had conquered the continent. They called him the emperor's goat son, and the nobility burned with envy toward his mother. But our hero had a deeper motive, securing the future of the Leaf and Ernest bloodline. Once noble, the Ernest family was now broke, clutching onto a title while living like commoners. Seeing his family struggle, our hero decided to stage an epic financial intervention. He gave them a piece of the soda empire. Now people queued for blocks, paying triple for a taste. He expanded into yogurt and MSG, creating back-to-back bangers. The family's net worth went to the moon. No other house could compete with their new drip. The princess was so moved, she actually teared up. Sensing a weird vibe, he offered her waffles and lemonade as a peace offering. Instead, she pressed a cold blade to his neck. She had money. What he lacked was hands in a fight. She declared it was time for his training arc. He faked a smile and agreed. Though he secretly hated the grind, he mimicked her moves half-heartedly, hoping she'd get bored. But seeing his sister's fierce dedication to her dream, he knew there was no easy escape. To evolve into a fierce warrior, she grasped her blade with newfound resolve. That once delicate girl had finally shattered her limits. Her strength became undeniable. Seeing her fire, our protagonist knew he couldn't slack off, and began his own grueling training. Months passed. While traveling by carriage, our hero realized that his name now preceded him everywhere he went. The commoners hailed him like a superstar, a literal local idol. The fame was intoxicating, but the emperor's sudden summons loomed overhead. Was a reward coming? His father's icy silence still kept him on edge, though he'd learned to navigate that coldness. He took his seat, casually sampling the decadent treats prepared for the meeting. He'd grown so accustomed to his father's presence that he felt strangely at peace. Yet mid-bite, the emperor dropped a bombshell, a high-ranking official post. Our hero was stunned. This move came much sooner than expected. The emperor insisted that while transitions take time, no one would dare challenge his rightful appointment. However, our hero declined. Palace politics were a cage he wasn't ready to enter. Sipping his tea, he confessed. The proposal left him speechless. He had unfinished business in alchemy and lacked the confidence to play the noble's game. Accepting the title of heir would paint a massive target on his back. Recently, the empress and the current prince had been eerily silent. He knew better than to kick the hornet's nest while they still saw him as harmless. By staying low profile, he avoided their wrath. But catching the emperor's eye is worlds apart from officially joining the bloody race for the throne. He wasn't ready for a sibling war over the crown. Was this a calculated provocation by the emperor? Survival of the fittest isn't just a law for the wild. It dominates humanity, a brutal struggle where the strong feast and the weak are crushed. But why obsess over deadly politics? He wanted an escape. Soon our hero was galloping through the countryside, pushing further from the palace walls than ever before. This freedom was a drug. He'd been drowning in paperwork lately. He never envisioned becoming a paper-pushing bureaucrat. He was born to roam the vast world, hunting for the ultimate challenge. Nostalgia hit him like a physical blow. While the chance remained, he intended to savor every second of liberty. He rode alongside his sister, the true architect of this getaway. She was shocked by his elite riding skills, but soon questioned why a literal army was shadowing them. The guards looked ready for a bloodbath. She claimed the escort was overkill, but our hero just laughed. True freedom is a rare currency these days, he remarked. But his laughter died instantly, as a sinister aura radiated from the woods. This wasn't some low-level beast. Something felt dangerously wrong. He shouted to set traps and stay alert, but the group ignored his instincts, charging blindly ahead. A night revealed that this treacherous forest was the princess's personal training ground. Our hero was floored. Why choose such a hellish place? Was she fearless? He recalled the moment she first pitched this trip over dinner, asking if he was sick of being a palace slave. She promised excitement, but only now did he realize his sister was a complete wild card. She saw adventure as a game, and today that game turned deadly. Despite the risks he followed, he trusted her even if she was a total menace at home. She certainly knew how to command. Her plan: use the knights as bait while she flanked the enemy. She boldly claimed she'd solo the threat, even against 20 hulking orcs. Witnessing orcs up close was a first for him. They were monsters, but the princess's lethal combat prowess, combined with lightning reflexes, was terrifyingly elite. Her dominant aura surged, rallying every soldier on the field, and the carnage continued until the moon rose. Afterward, our hero checked in on her condition. She had clearly needed this release. However, she begged him to keep her battle hunger a secret. If the court found out, her refined reputation would crumble. Observing her closely, he realized she was still just a girl burdened by duty. He asked what drove her, and her expression dimmed. Since she was small, the world told her, princesses don't wield steel. They dismissed her passion as a phase. They expected her to grow bored, marry a stranger, and become a trophy wife. That future felt like a death sentence. He finally understood that in the nobility, political marriages are the status quo, a cage built for the family name. She despised the scripted life. She yearned for the agency our hero possessed, to carve out her own legacy and serve the empire through her own strength. Winning the public's hearts was easy, as our protagonist was already a local legend on these streets. She aimed to glorify her bloodline through raw talent, not marriage. She was the master of her own fate. Our hero offered a supportive nod, affirming her dreams. In return, she called him the perfect brother. She noted they needed to return before sunrise, eyes fixed on the distant moonlit fortress ahead. A dragon loomed nearby, yet the oblivious crowd ignored it, focused solely on subduing the fierce Kanya. An orc uprooted a massive tree, charging with a blood-curdling howl. One lethal swing from her blade ended him. Slain orcs littered the ground. Even the royal guards watched in awe, realizing she had dominated the battlefield alone. The knights realized they were just dead weight. Honestly, they almost felt pity for those poor orcs. Kanya cleaved 2 foes instantly. Errol shouted for her to finish up so they could make it back. He grinned at her shocked expression. She had lost herself in battle again, but Kanya didn't seem to mind. Her enemies were decimated. After a moment of cold satisfaction, she finally agreed it was time to depart. Her stallion was spent. She looked stunned. Errol offered a solution. The beast was too exhausted to continue. He suggested she ride with him, while experts tended to her horse. The royal siblings mounted up. Kanya took the reins, as Errol knew she was the superior rider. Being shorter, sitting behind while trying to steer would have looked totally ridiculous and awkward. They raced across the emerald fields, outpacing their escort. Suddenly, Errol's instincts flared with danger. He skidded to a halt. A worried Kanya asked what was up. He sensed a presence above. He felt an invisible threat. Something massive was lurking behind the clouds, and it smelled like death. It was a wyvern. Before anyone could react, Errol snatched the reins and prepared for impact. He yelled at Kanya to hold on tight, then signaled the guards toward the approaching monster. He commanded everyone to retreat, but the guards stood frozen, doubting a threat they couldn't see. They insisted these grounds were safe. After all, the emperor had supposedly purged every wyvern years ago. Mid-sentence, a wyvern swooped down, snatching a knight and soaring right over their terrified heads. Absolute chaos erupted. The men realized it wasn't just one, an entire flock was descending from the sky. Where did these beasts come from? Errol kicked his horse into a gallop, desperate to save his sister. Knights were being devoured or crushed by massive talons. It was a bloodbath, and no one was safe. This wasn't a hunt, it was a massacre. Then the prince noticed the creatures were exhaling deadly toxic fumes. Their brute strength was bad enough, but the poison was lethal. Soldiers were dropping like flies everywhere. Kanya's heart broke for her fallen men. Errol snapped at her to stay focused on surviving their escape. A wyvern spewed poison at them, but a mage countered it with a brilliant blazing fireball. The order to shield the princess echoed, but they were hopelessly outnumbered by the winged demons. These monsters resisted low-tier magic, leaving the mages helpless. One wyvern began circling the royal pair. Errol had no choice. He leveled his hand like a gun, firing lethal bolts of pure mana. One beast crashed. Another fell. Errol played it cool, acting like he wasn't the one doing the heavy lifting. He casually thanked the mages and spurred the horse forward, hoping to outrun the carnage behind them. Suddenly, a wyvern blocked their path. Both froze in terror, fearing their luck had finally run out. A golden-haired knight suddenly appeared, slaying the beast instantly. She barked at them to flee at once. They dove into the woods. Errol was impressed by her skill and vowed to reward her later. They escaped the slaughter, but deep in the forest, a chilling laugh echoed through the trees. Someone was mocking their suffering. The prince halted, his eyes darting around as he demanded an identity. A sinister laugh erupted from a dark mist. A cloaked figure emerged, shrouded in a terrifying aura. He held a mysterious staff, his face hidden. Errol demanded to know who dared stand in their way. The prince narrowed his eyes at the stranger's staff. It radiated an ancient, ominous power. He asked what the man wanted, but got only a smirk. Then the stranger's gaze turned cold. He aimed his staff at the siblings, unleashing a magical storm. Errol's mind raced as death approached. A devastating blast ripped through the ranks, obliterating the vanguard. Errol didn't hesitate, yanking his reins to pull Kanya behind his own frame. Behind them, a graveyard of smoking armor and fallen souls remained. The sorcerer mocked Kanya's agility, unaware Errol was the one pulling the strings. The princess was paralyzed by fear, but Errol's mind raced with cold suspicion. How did this mage know her? Was Kanya the true mark? A chilling laugh erupted from the mage, savoring the twisted drama unfolding before him like a dark comedy. With a predatory grin, he raised his staff as shadows writhed like vipers. That sinister aura unsettled Errol's soul. But Kanya's frantic gesture snapped him back. He looked ahead and watched the slaughtered knights and wyverns begin to twitch. Necrotic energy surged from the corpses, reanimating them as a ghastly legion. The living soldiers fell back in horror. "And the second princess," the mage shrieked, unleashing his puppet army toward Kanya, his voice full of venom. He vowed to humble the king with blood. That lethal threat hung in the air as his fury erupted. As the dead lunged, the mage's triumph turned to confusion. Errol's hand was already raised in a lethal gesture. Forming a gun with his fingers, Errol locked onto his target. If Kanya was the goal, the mage died first. One shot. A concentrated mana bullet tore through the air. The mage's scream of fury was cut short. As his body hit the dirt, Kanya stood frozen, staring in disbelief. Even the knights couldn't process the kill. "Who knows?" Errol shrugged it off. High-level magic tends to backfire on the weak and incompetent. The master was dead, but his puppets lived on. The knights gritted their teeth, readying blades for another round. Their blonde savior shouted for them to retreat. Dragging his dazed sister, Errol prepared to move into the woods. "Why are they still moving?" Kanya gasped. "The caster is gone. The magic should have broken by now. It's a timed curse," Errol analyzed. "It won't stop until the clock runs out. We need to go, trust me." They vanished into the tree line while their men made a final stand. Soon, an oppressive darkness swallowed them. Sheltering beneath a jagged cliff, Errol frantically rubbed sticks together. Kanya sat beside him, her spirit visibly flickering. He promised her the nightmare would end soon. Without its anchor, the undead army would eventually crumble and vanish. "Our units are already scouring the area for us," Errol added. Kanya looked at him completely surprised. "I thought you were just a bookworm, not a survivalist," she teased. Errol smirked. Never underestimate the power of logic. Friction was just physics, a trick from an old text. He considered using mana to cheat the fire, but Kanya was watching like a hawk. He couldn't risk exposure. Despite his burning muscles, a spark finally caught. A small flame blossomed into a roar. They stared into the orange glow, the silence between them growing heavy. As the adrenaline drained, Kanya's guilt surfaced. "I ruined everything," she whispered. "It was an accident," he countered. "You couldn't have known." She looked up, her eyes wet with tears. "Are you scared, brother?" Errol didn't lie. "Terrified," he admitted. "But having you here, it makes the fear much easier to bear." He mentioned the wyvern's ferocity, letting her believe he was just as vulnerable as she felt in that moment. She squeezed his hand, her voice trembling. "Thank you. I don't think I would have made it without you." He felt her violent tremors. Cold or trauma, it didn't matter. The weight of the day was finally crushing her. She lamented the loss of their guard. Nearly every man had traded his life to ensure their royal escape. This was the bloody reality of the imperial line, and Kanya was finally waking up. It was brutal. They huddled together for warmth as her eyelids grew heavy. But Errol's mind was still in survival mode. "We're not safe yet," he thought. Suddenly, a bone-chilling roar shattered the night from the heights above. They bolted upright, witnessing a titan's duel. A majestic griffin and a savage wyvern were tearing at each other. The griffin spiraled toward the earth, the wyvern in hot pursuit. Then Errol spotted it a nest in the crags. It was a hunt. The wyvern lunged for a chick, but the mother griffin intercepted her throat, caught fast. A helpless blind chick shrieked as the sky above them rained feathers and blood in the moonlight. With a final agonizing shriek, the griffin's massive bulk slammed into the cliffside, causing the mountain to buckle. "Move," Errol roared, throwing Kanya out of the path of a massive rockfall. They scrambled for safety, as the griffin's corpse and tons of stone pulverized the ground. A thick shroud of dust choked the clearing. The wyvern was gone, likely blinded by the kill. But as the dust settled, Errol suddenly stopped breathing. She vanished from his side, already digging through the debris where the beast lay. Errol sprinted over, shouting a warning, but Kanya calmly whispered that the monster was lifeless. Frustrated by her recklessness, Errol sighed as Kanya gazed mournfully at the creature's massive corpse. He smirked, asking if she wanted a funeral, but her eyes were fixed on something else. The griffin had sacrificed itself for its young, which Kanya now cradled gently in her arms. Baffled by the discovery, Errol stared in shock while casting a suspicious glance at the fallen beast. He wanted to walk away, yet fate had other plans, as Kanya made an insane proposal. She wanted to keep the hatchling. Kanya was thrilled, but Errol's soul was screaming no. Suddenly, a knight's voice echoed in relief, finding the royal sibling standing over the dead monster. With the chick nestled close, Kanya beamed at the approaching soldiers, relieved to see them alive. Casualties stopped after the mage fell, but a piercing shriek suddenly tore through the night air. Panic flared as the truth hit, while Errol muttered about the knight's impeccable, albeit late timing. The decision was final. Kanya was adopting the beast. How? No one had a single clue. 7 days passed, and while the chaos subsided, a new winged menace now called the palace home. The baby griffin pounced on Errol's bed, its shrill cry shattering the prince's peaceful morning slumber. One puppy dog look broke his resolve, and he caved, petting the too cute creature instantly. It would stay until its mother returned. That night, Kanya was whisked away to finally rest. Orders flew to clear the area before predators arrived, but Errol's gaze lingered on the carcass. Ensuring the coast was clear, he unsheathed his blade, looming over the griffin's cold remains. He sliced into its chest, claiming the glowing mana stone needed to bind the hatchling's loyalty. As Errol admired the shimmering gem, the rumble of a carriage signaled a very loud arrival. Kanya practically teleported out of the carriage, screaming for her new favorite companion, Fry. The chick bolted toward her. While they reunited, Errol discussed the Dark Mage's fate with the general. The attacker was now a wanted man. Nearby, Kanya's laughter echoed as she played with Fry. As Fry circled above, the general confirmed his spies were hunting for any trace of the mage. Suspecting a conspiracy, Errol sighed, questioning who harbored the most hatred for the imperial bloodline. The list of enemies was long, but the general's confusion prompted Errol to simply dismiss him. Cheerful shouts and praise for Fry filled the hall. Errol watched his sister, his expression softening. The thought of anyone targeting Kanya was sickening. He swore to become her ultimate shadow shield. Another strike was inevitable, but Kanya was his family. He would burn the world to protect her. He needed to master his aura before turning 20. Masking his intensity, he flashed a playful grin. He invited Kanya for some fun, and she agreed instantly while squeezing her fluffy companion tightly. Suddenly, steel clashed. Errol's gaze transformed, locking onto his sister, like a predator eyeing its target. This wasn't the fun she expected. Breathless Kanya recoiled as they both reset their fighting stances. Kanya braced herself, stunned by his speed. Beaming, her brother revealed he'd been training in secret. He had a surprise for her. Impressed by his flow, Kanya realized he'd mastered this alone. He was just channeling pure mana into his strikes, the most fundamental yet difficult combat logic. Hearing this nearly broke Kanya. This was exactly what she'd been struggling with for years. Errol explained his unique method, and Kanya's eyes widened. "You're a total genius," she exclaimed. He offered to guide her mana personally. Her face glowed with hope. Could I really do it? With a confident smirk, Errol promised she'd master it quickly under his expert royal tuition. He was the perfect mentor, especially since he was secretly pumping mana into her while she napped. After their garden tea, they locked themselves away to begin their grueling secret training sessions. The knight standing guard was shocked. Kanya was visiting her brother daily for intense aura drills. Her control over the aura sword began to skyrocket, shattering even Errol's most ambitious expectations. Finally, a shimmering sapphire aura flickered across her blade. She'd unlocked mana, and even Fry gave a nod of respect. His mother was legendary, but there was a catch. Her mana caused the cub's growth to skyrocket. The massive griffin now loomed over Kanya. Day by day, that weight became a literal burden. Kanya had ignited her spark, but the real grind was just beginning. Errol continued his mentorship, explaining that a massive mana pool was the ultimate key to god-tier power. With stars in his eyes, he described epic visions of her charging into the fray atop a majestic Fry. Kanya just chuckled, roasting her brother's overactive imagination, while Errol beamed and pulled her pet into a tight hug. She asked for a chance to ride soon, and he promised the day was near. Suddenly, the grand doors swung wide open. It was the sovereign himself. Errol and Kanya stood frozen in shock, wondering what brought the emperor to their doorstep. Their mother followed as maids bowed in a ripple. Errol knew the emperor should have been swamped with state affairs in the north. This was no social call. The emperor and their mother marched forward, coming to a dead stop right before the royal siblings. The kids offered a deep bow. Beaming with pride, their father mentioned hearing rumors about Errol's sudden interest in the sword. Their mother watched nearby, glowing. Errol played it cool, admitting science couldn't be his only focus if he wanted to survive this world. He was prioritizing self-defense and beast mastery now. His father's eyes widened, looking genuinely blown away by the boy's ambition. Errol could feel the pride radiating off him. Smirking, he touched his nose, wondering if he'd finally eclipsed his siblings in his father's eyes. Two servants entered, hauling a mysterious ornate wooden chest into the hall. Errol's gaze was glued to the box. "What's inside?" he asked. "A gift for you," his father replied. The lid opened to reveal a breathtaking masterpiece of a blade. His father urged him to test its balance immediately. It was a custom-forged weapon. Their mother whispered that Errol was far too young to be wielding such a dangerous piece of steel. But the emperor dismissed her, insisting that a boy needs the weight of a true lethal edge in his grip. Errol hoisted the heavy sword, sending a wave of anxiety through both parents as they watched his every move. Staring at the steel in awe, only one thought crossed his mind: this is peak. He even considered becoming a full-time swordsman. The emperor had never seen Errol look this hyped before. In that split second, he realized how much the boy cherished the gift. Despite the thrill, Errol kept his poker face. He accepted the weapon with a calm nod, refusing to give his true feelings away. He intentionally tripped, hitting the floor with the blade to downplay his talent. He had zero plans to stand out. Revealing his prowess meant being dragged into a bloody throne war. That toxic lifestyle was a hard pass for him. He wasn't about to blow his cover now. That future didn't fit his vibe, and he refused to waste his careful planning. Since no one suspected a thing, he sat on the floor, claiming he was obsessed with the new sword. However, he sighed, acting like he wasn't worthy. "A legendary blade like this belongs to a true prodigy," he suggested. He pointed right at Kanya. He knew she was a beast, already reaching the level of the Imperial Knights elite. That put her in a league of her own. He was still a rookie, but her potential was absolutely limitless. He calculated she'd easily break into the top 30 knights soon. It was time the world recognized her true strength. The emperor caught his drift and set a challenge. Kanya would have to go all out and prove her worth. Kanya froze in terror. Errol was rattled too. Why was his father suddenly so thirsty for a high-stakes demonstration of her power? After a moment of frantic thinking, the truth finally clicked in Errol's head. His father was a total sword-fighting addict. He challenged Kanya to strike him with Errol's new blade to prove her progress. Kanya was too paralyzed to speak. Errol could see the sheer panic in her eyes, so he gave her a quick, encouraging nudge. He signaled her to go full power. This was a rare chance to learn from the best, so she shouldn't hold back. Internally, Errol was smirking. He knew the princess could actually land a hit, and the emperor could certainly handle whatever she threw at him. The duel began right there. The emperor stepped back, noting her stance was solid, but claiming it wasn't enough to secure a win. Errol wondered if his father was actually underestimating her, or if he was just baiting her into an attack. Because Kanya was already a blur, she lunged at the emperor with godlike speed, moving faster than the eye could see. Even their mother's eyes couldn't track the movement. Errol was hyped. His sister's agility was officially on a whole different level. Her raw strength and mana control were flawless. But one thing still felt off: the emperor's eerie, confident smirk. Was he not even sweating? In a flash, the emperor parried the entire assault with a single, effortless flick of his wrist. He chuckled, admitting it wasn't a bad attempt. In fact, that strike had some real teeth. The sovereign marveled, claiming he'd never witnessed such a raw aura in a child, then pressed for the absolute truth. Errol had been supervising her blade work. He nonchalantly replied it was just a small experiment testing a wild hunch. His theory was a total success. Knowing exactly how to awaken a swordsman's hidden spark, he gambled on his sister. Since she fit the criteria perfectly, the emperor questioned the method. Immediately, Errol sensed a shift in the air. His father was baiting him into a trap, but Errol realized the old man's ambitions were far more grand. The emperor was dreaming of a mass-produced army of Aura Knights, an invincible legion, a total power move. Errol warned him that if he expected Kanya-level miracles from everyone, he'd be dead wrong. His sister was a prodigy who'd bled for her craft since childhood. Her current power was pure, unadulterated talent, coupled with insane grit. The emperor's expression soured at that, but Errol knew the harsh reality of growth. Sure, anyone could improve by fixing their flaws. The real nightmare was the sheer scale of the task. Training every soldier individually would be exhausting. Plus, the thought of being surrounded by sweaty, macho men daily hard pass. He wasn't about that testosterone-fueled life. His eyes deserved beauty. Still, he couldn't just say no to the emperor. To avoid suspicion, he pitched it as a classified top-secret technique meant only for an elite chosen few, essentially a forbidden art exclusive to the imperial bloodline. This made the emperor pause, weighing the risks. Errol hoped the bait worked. To his father, the nobles were scavenging hyenas ready to turn any weapon against the crown. Why hand rivals the keys to power? Finally, the emperor gave a firm nod. The deal was sealed. Fine, it remains a family heirloom, he decreed. Errol's mood instantly peaked. This was a massive win. A signature imperial martial art passed down through ages. It sounded incredibly cool and sophisticated. He grinned, knowing every imperial sibling would now be dragged into a brutal training hellscape. Talk about a golden opportunity. 1 month later, the emperor had pushed the regimen to the limit. The results were already shaking the palace foundations. With Khania as the gold standard, some were deemed too weak to even touch the style. The bar was high. One truth was undeniable. Without Errol's genius, the empire's meteoric rise to power would have been impossible. Later, while snacking on a premium cookie, an escort arrived. It was time for the next big phase. He needed to handpick his personal guards. The list of qualified applicants was absolutely stacked with elite warriors. These were the emperor's hand-picked finalists. Errol stared down at the mountain of paperwork with a heavy sigh. Most were high-ranking nobles. Funny how a few years ago these same families looked down on him like trash. Now, he was the empire's most wanted. It was inevitable, but he still found the sudden popularity quite ironic. Honestly, with his current strength, he didn't even need protection. But he refused to repeat his past tragic mistakes. He wouldn't let his life end in misery again. The princess wailed in disbelief while Errol's head started spinning. He considered picking 3 random files, but Duke Merman insisted a personal touch was mandatory for this selection. Errol caved. Being the interviewer for once felt kind of fresh. He began scanning through the detailed resumes. Combat feats, bloodlines, and achievements. It was a massive lore dump. Asha complained, but Errol stayed focused. He prioritized visual aesthetics above all else. Boredom struck instantly, and he drifted off, leaving everyone utterly confused. He snapped back to reality just in time. The physical auditions were starting. Time to meet the candidates in person. He expected goddess-tier beauties, but instead he was met with pure, unbridled aggression. Their war cries were deafening. They radiated a terrifying, bloodthirsty aura. Despite them being women, Errol's romantic expectations were completely shattered. Reality was way more intense than his daydreams. They asked why he looked ghost-white, but he played it off. He told them to carry on. This wasn't a shoujo manga. These were elite, battle-hardened knights of the highest order. Hard work didn't look like a flower garden. Enough slacking. He leaned over, ready to get down to business. He called for silence and officially kicked off the session. These women weren't just scary. They were walking tanks. Their power was legit. One candidate even looked like she could outmuscle the emperor himself in a brawl. With these monsters guarding him, safety was guaranteed. Then he spotted one girl who actually looked normal. She stood out with her feminine charm. Post-interview, the choice seemed impossible. Every single one of them was perfect. He sent them out to clear his head. His brain was fried. How was he supposed to pick? Deciding was a total headache. Closing his eyes, he focused his inner mana, letting the energy flood his senses. Sharpening his focus, he triggered a legendary skill that was notoriously difficult to manifest. It required grueling discipline. He hovered, feeling a bit rusty after years of stagnation. He called for round 2, summoning the candidates to enter the chamber one by one. This was his true play. He intended to read the hidden intentions of every knight. He sought worthy guardians, yet repeatedly found only darkness lurking in their hearts. Through his mystic eyes, the raw truth of their inner selves was laid bare. No interrogation was needed to separate the sincere warriors from the treacherous fakes. He read their soul's aura, hunting for those who truly desired to serve him. Their loyalty had to be a choice. Then a familiar aristocratic woman stepped inside. She was a void devoid of even a single spark of warmth. Asia Pernal. Despite her rank, she looked suspiciously flawless. He decided to investigate her background further. Perhaps he'd missed something vital. Then again, if she was irrelevant to his goals, digging into her past was pointless. Still, she was his favorite candidate so far. Asia was a standout, but he needed 2. Was Miss Muscle really his only option? Another girl entered next, introducing herself with a bright smile as Sina Galil. She was the final name. He couldn't imagine how this radiant sunbeam ended up here. Her aura was blindingly pure. He questioned if she'd truly spent so long serving overseas. Her record showed a chaotic trail of transfers. Blushing, she finally confessed the truth. She simply couldn't stay in one place for long. A true wandering spirit. He guessed she'd been exiled everywhere, yet he sensed absolutely zero malice in her. She passed the vibe check. He understood the primal urge to keep moving. Her constant job hopping was enough of an explanation. Finally, the interviews were officially over. He promised to contact the winners, though his decision was already carved in stone. The victors, Asia Pernal and Sina Galil. 2 deadly flowers now graced his garden. With Asia on his right and Sina on his left, he felt genuinely stunned. Their expressions turned lethal the moment duty began. It was time for a trial. When they questioned the location, he simply stated he'd judge their prowess himself. He wanted to see their true limits. No matter their strength, he could transcend them. He needed to gauge their rhythm. Asia stepped up, asking how they should demonstrate it. She agreed a strength test was fair, and his eyes flashed with sudden excitement. There was only one way, a duel. Neither protested as he turned his gaze aside. They seemed evenly matched, so a direct confrontation was the only way to decide. He asked who was stronger, deliberately baiting them to test their warrior pride. Challenged, their competitive instincts flared. They began sizing each other up like predators. The atmosphere turned electric. The sheer tension between them could set the air ablaze. As for him, he just wanted a front row seat with some popcorn. One girl asked about rules while the other let their master decide the conditions. They were both fully motivated. He gave one final warning, no permanent damage. Sina smirked, promising to go easy on Asia since their master wished it. Asia's experience was vast, but she snapped back that she needed zero pity. Her confidence was absolute. Clearly, Sina's legend as a wandering warrior was no exaggeration, yet the atmosphere turned chillingly violent. Were they actually planning to kill each other? Things were heading south fast, so he barked out a final warning to chill. He clapped his hands, and the immediate shockwave of their collision nearly sent him flying. He was irritated by their lack of restraint. He watched their savage clash, noting that Sina wasn't predicting moves but reacting with god-tier reflexes. They fought like starving beasts, not noble ladies. Sina lunged with her spear, but Asia countered with a brutal kick that broke her guard. Seeing the ground stained with blood, he roared for them to stop. He lectured them both, calling Asia too impatient and Sina far too indecisive. Asa recognized his combat skills, recalling the rumor that he was the one who forged the second princess. Should they go all out, the princess had recently reached expert level, a feat that shocked the entire kingdom. That legendary reputation preceded him. He agreed. As his personal guards, they needed to reach a higher plane. He asked if they were ready, but the two were busy whispering, shocked he'd put in this much work. They looked completely lost, and he began to glow again, radiating an intense, overwhelming pressure. He claimed his father was a training demon, so pushing his own subordinates to the limit cost him nothing. He vowed they'd become elite swordsmen under his watch, and just like that, the special Hell Week training began. He ordered them to follow, leading the way into a classroom that felt more like a study hall. They wondered if they'd really train in a place like this. The whole vibe felt strangely out of place. He stated theory came first and hoped they were ready. Then he pulled out his manual on knightly arts. If this guide actually worked, he'd monetize it later. Sena, however, was still struggling with basic aura control. She couldn't grasp how to distribute energy, and honestly, she didn't seem to have any interest in learning. Realizing his book wouldn't be a bestseller at this rate, he noted they wouldn't change after one chapter. He shifted focus to their internal mana, a completely different beast. He wanted them to visualize their inner cores. More specifically, he pointed out the hidden circuits, the very channels through which a warrior's mana actually flows. In their case, he could see those channels were partially blocked, severely limiting their true explosive potential. Blindly forcing out aura like an amateur wasn't just a waste of stamina, it was a total death wish. Trying to force those channels open too hard could trigger a backfire, leaving them in a negative state. The girls tensed up immediately. He explained that first they had to master the massive energy within them. They needed to hoard mana, use it daily, and circulate it with perfect efficiency before doing anything else. Once they mastered that, he'd personally upgrade their aura techniques. That promise set their fighting spirits on fire. Adjusting his robe, he prepared to drop specialized theory tailored to each of their unique combat styles. He started with Sena telling her to focus. She insisted she was fine, showing off a fist glowing with energy. He then challenged her to focus power into her other hand and both legs simultaneously. A true test. She failed instantly, just as he expected. A real warrior doesn't need to coat their entire body in aura. It's better to focus energy only where needed, since burning aura too fast leads to total exhaustion. She tried repeating his instructions, but nothing worked. Juggling aura in multiple spots was a sensory nightmare. He held out his hands, suggesting a different approach. "Let's try to find a better rhythm," he said. He explained that focusing on the rising heat from his touch would make gathering her aura much easier. It worked like a charm. Sena's hands flared up. She finally got it, though she was low-key distracted. Our hero was totally clueless about her comment. He just felt a sudden weird chill down his spine. He told her to lock in and quit the games. Instantly, Sena lit up with excitement, finally understanding. He wondered if his explanation was a bit off, but he let it go. Results were all that mattered. Next was Asa. He brought up their last duel and how she'd recklessly thrown a kick without thinking. She couldn't believe she'd chosen hand-to-hand combat against a master who clearly outclassed her in every way. He called it a mistake. True skill, especially with a spear, requires ice-cold composure and zero rushing. Exhausted, the reason for this brutal training finally clicked for Asa. She was beginning to see the light. Our hero sat on her back, ignoring her complaints. He told her to concentrate until she felt the shift. "Stay steady and focused," he commanded. He needed her to be undisturbed even while in the zone. The girl suddenly sat up, realizing just how much effort our hero had been putting into her lately. There was no point worrying over a small fly. That annoying pest had finally become too irritating to ignore. The training left Asa completely drained, yet under his guidance, she was becoming something truly legendary. He could see her growth clearly. At first, she doubted the intensity, but now she knew the truth. The proof was standing right there, a massive tree sliced clean through, showing the power of his tutelage. Asa wondered if she even deserved lessons from a master like him, despite her own noble birthright. Her family's ruin was finalized when bloodthirsty monsters ravaged their quiet southern village. Caught in the heart of the massacre, her father perished, defending them from the beasts. He chose to stay behind as a shield, a sacrifice that left young Asa devastated. Soon, even the allied nobles turned cold, abandoning her family in their darkest hour. To survive, she enlisted with the knights, her martial genius awakening her aura instantly. A direct royal summons sent her to the capital, landing her in the bottom-tier 15th Squad. It was a collection of low-level scrubs, led by a hopelessly lazy and useless commander. Despite his seniority, his aura was pathetic, having secured his rank through pure nepotism. He constantly harassed his subordinates creepily, claiming Asa reminded him of his own daughter. After his disgusting dinner invitation, she stormed out and obliterated a tree in fury. She wallowed in despair, wondering if she should just slice him apart next time. She applied for a royal bodyguard position, never expecting to actually land the job. However, the new post was a blessing, finally providing her family with a better life. Just a bit more savings, and she could finally send her brother to the academy. In her eyes, every recent blessing came from our hero, demanding a debt of gratitude. Meanwhile, Sena faced interrogation about why she was always awake before the crack of dawn. Vigilance was survival for her, coming from a long lineage of elite mercenary warriors. She was raised within a stateless mercenary tribe, knowing no other way of existence. But the 30-year peace with the Empire had slowly drained the demand for their blades. As work dried up, her father warned that their world had no room left for them. He urged her to find a new path before their legacy faded into nothingness. The veterans would hold the line, but he wanted the youth to escape that life. We soon discover that the man giving her this heartfelt advice was her father. She accepted his choice, but a lonely silence soon filled their once rowdy home. Night training became her solace until the news of her father's sudden death arrived. He died clashing with a corrupt lord. She called him a fool, yet was just like him. Like father, like daughter, she threw herself into every conflict with reckless abandon. She once brutally thrashed a man for trying to recruit her villagers into banditry. With no regrets, she drifted through dangerous zones until volunteering to guard the prince. Escorting the prince felt right. He was a genuinely good man, worth her protection. She felt incredibly lucky, realizing that for some reason, she actually loved this life. Our hero was almost too good to be true, lacking the typical arrogance of nobility. His gentle touch sent strange jolts through her, making her heart flutter unexpectedly. These new emotions were overwhelming, and she felt she could never truly repay his kindness. Eventually, both girls reached the same realization regarding their duty to him. The only way to honor him was to guard our hero for the rest of their lives. Despite lacking magical or martial power, the hero showed a terrifyingly genius learning curve. He created wealth-boosting inventions and helped the princess achieve aura specialist mastery. To them, he was a brilliant leader, currently 13, and lounging with some lemonade. He was convinced that the peak of human achievement was doing absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, the emperor hosted guests, noting the hero would turn 14 very soon. His coming-of-age ceremony approached a major event for someone of his legendary talent. They planned to grant him territory, then a decision that faced zero open opposition. A count warned that people might mistake this as a sign of succession. The emperor's face turned tomato red, veins popping as he roared at the absurd idea. How many times did he have to scream it? The throne meant absolutely nothing to him. But whispers were already crossing borders, and worse, the young blood of the nobility was rallying behind our hero. The tide of public favor was turning away from the crown prince. Even if they masked their feelings, the shift was undeniable. The emperor saw the writing on the wall. He had seen this exact power struggle play out once before. He shut them down instantly, but they wouldn't back off, claiming this wasn't just some personal grievance. Fear was spreading that the royal line was compromised. They preached about stability, but the emperor saw through their lies. Their desperate pleas all boiled down to one thing: a coordinated strike to exile our hero to the world's end. Trapped by their ultimatum, the emperor sighed. His hands were tied. Reluctantly, he agreed to weigh their modest proposal. "Find him a wasteland," he commanded. When our hero finally cracked the seal on that letter, the truth came crashing down. Every line confirmed his suspicions. His father's advisors hadn't just requested land, they had demanded his total removal. They called it an inheritance. He knew it was banishment. He let out a breathless laugh, then a strange joy took hold. Finally, a domain of his own. This was the ultimate prize. Why fight for a dusty throne anyway? With those snake-like nobles lurking, he was better off elsewhere. Being a lord was 100 times better than being a target. No more being suffocated by his brother's shadows. This was his turf earned by his own merit and sheer will. Then northern Thalia came into view, a frozen hellscape where winter never ends. One slip up here meant a cold, icy grave. Tilling this cursed soil was impossible. It was obvious those noble vultures had handpicked this death trap for him. Regardless of the danger, his mind was set. They were leaving this palace behind once and for all. The clock started ticking. 1 year and 1 month, until his adulthood ceremony, every second had to be spent preparing for survival. He gathered his people and laid it out. Straight ruling a frozen wasteland wasn't some bedtime story for children. Only the brave follow me, he declared. If you're scared, walk away now. But if you're loyal, step into the light. He masked his thrill as the alchemist and his inner circle stepped up. They were actually going to do this. Yet shadows haunted Sanam's eyes. She had been stationed in that frozen wasteland years ago, a fact that caught him off guard. He assumed she'd seen every hellhole on the map, but Sanam admitted the north wasn't exactly dangerous in the usual way. It was just brutally, mind-numbingly cold. When she said there weren't even many monsters to fight, he nearly collapsed in disappointment. The place had zero redeeming qualities. Hearing even Sanam call it insanely cold revealed the true malice behind this gift. He kicked back in his chair with a smirk. Honestly, this is better than I imagined, he remarked coolly. He'd expected a pit of venomous beasts or a dragon's den. Being a human popsicle was a walk in the park compared to that. His knights immediately broke down, moved to tears by his courage. They drew their blades, swearing to shield him from the frost. They totally misread him, but he didn't care. Later, Asia cornered Sanam at the gate, demanding the cold, hard truth. Something in Sanam's story didn't sit right. If Asia sensed the lie, then their master definitely knew something was up. It wasn't just about the temperature. There was a darker reason why knights were sent to that white abyss. They were sent to hunt the terrifying creatures that could survive such lethal cold. Sanam tried to joke, but her smile was hollow. Asia didn't find it funny at all. She'd follow him into the jaws of death, but this betrayal cut deep. She couldn't believe they'd throw him away like trash. Still, she told Sanam to chill. She'd seen that look in his eyes. He was 5 steps ahead, as always. Fear was a concept he simply didn't understand, and that gave her hope. She knew he'd conquer the cold. Even so, Asia prepared a secret message to send back to her homeland. Our hero tossed the final reports aside. On paper, his new life was perfectly organized, but reality was another beast entirely. His thoughts drifted to his mother. Even with her brave face, he knew this exile was tearing her soul apart. He paced his room like a caged lion. He'd sworn the maids to secrecy, desperate to shield her from the grim news. But would she be safe once he left? The memory of the brutal hit on his sister still burned in his mind. He needed a lifeline, communication orbs, long-range teleportation. He needed a way to strike back from across the continent. Magic scrolls, high-tier mages, his brain was on fire, calculating every possible move for the pieces on the board. One wrong move and everything would crumble. For now, the entire manor was a whirlwind of frantic preparation. Besides, wasn't a frozen hell the perfect playground for a pro like him? It was time to show them his true power. Step 1 of the grand plan, absolute power. He summoned his secret weapons as Pion and his apprentices stepped into the light. Our hero spotted a familiar face and uttered one cold demand. Pion agreed to the secrecy. Our hero claimed the job was simple. He needed an item fast. The raw urgency caught Pion off guard. Pion scrutinized the design. The intricate details made his heart stop instantly. He doubted a boy drew this. Our hero's gaze silenced his skepticism. I designed it, he declared. It was an upgraded brain-stimulating artifact. This new model was double the efficiency of the old sage necklace. Costs dropped tenfold. Pion couldn't imagine a prince possessing such god-tier knowledge. Seeing Pion's shock, the prince asked if he could handle the task. Stuttering, Pion swore he could build anything with the right materials. Our hero flashed a knowing grin and slammed down a gold sack. This paid for the materials, and more importantly for Pion's silence. Pion's glasses nearly shattered. The prince noted his generosity had conditions. Every mage hit the deck. A dark satisfaction washed over our protagonist. Money was the ultimate leash. He looked like a kid but commanded respect. Finish in 1 month, he commanded. He knew the gold was well spent. He kept them busy. Days later, the mages returned with the item. The sage necklace gleamed. Don't call it that, he muttered, cringing. 10 days. Their speed was insane. The quality was truly top tier. 1 sample is enough. Now we move to mass production immediately. The mages prayed for 5 units, but our hero's smile turned terrifying. I need 50, he chirped. The exhausted mages felt their souls depart. Pion declared they could handle it. Our hero beamed like the sun. Living 100 lives made him ruthless. Phase 2 was now underway. Inside the carriage, Asia asked where they were heading in such haste. He replied that this specific mission required a personal hands-on touch. Asia's heart chilled at his reply. We are heading to the slave market. Asia exploded in shock, screaming that this was an absolute moral disaster. She assumed the worst. He realized she had cast him as a villain. In her mind, he was a tyrant, ready to whip innocent workers. She imagined him starving people. Panicked, he waved his arms to explain. "I'm not a monster," he shouted. But the word slave meant hell. He expected agony and broken families. Instead, the reality was strangely different. The facility was spotless. Asia noted that sick cargo meant lost profits. Overseers kept them healthy. Suddenly, a man emerged with a professional grin. He boasted about their inventory. "Master Errol, I have what you desire." The man introduced himself as Jan, the manager bowing low in greeting. "Address me by my title," Errol corrected. He was there for business. His reputation had preceded him. Jan's excessive politeness was born of fear. Jan prattled on about their legal operations and high-quality human labor. Asia whispered the truth: most were victims of crushing taxes and debts. Bound by unpayable debts, many had sold their freedom to survive. Jan added that they avoided common thugs, thieves, and dangerous criminals. Asia guessed they'd prepared for the visit. Soon, they reached Jan's desk. The manager's eyes gleamed greedily. "What specific talent are you seeking?" Our protagonist skipped the small talk. He demanded a massive variety, and plenty of them. Jan's eyes lit up as he calculated the profit. But when Errol requested 150, Jan's jaw dropped. Seeing his shock, the prince wondered if that number was actually high. Jan agreed to the deal, though he'd need to pull from outer branches to fulfill such a massive order. The merchant probed for his motives, but the prince simply claimed his intentions were strictly above board. He had a single requirement: group the slaves by family ties or deep personal bonds into small squads. Jan admitted it was tricky, even if selling entire households together was a fairly common practice. He summoned his staff immediately, and they hauled in a mountain of paperwork. Even the prince was stunned. The meticulous records of literate individuals genuinely impressed Errol. Turning back to Jan, he had one final question. Could they handle the logistics of transporting them to their final destination? He was ready to sign. When a heavy sack of gold slammed onto the table, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Jan's eyes sparkled with greed. He bowed low, declaring that Errol would forever be his most prestigious client. Money was the ultimate universal language. Whether here or in his past life, gold always smoothed the path. Inside the carriage, Asia questioned why he needed such a massive influx of people all at once. His strategy was simple. Population is power. To rebuild his new domain, he needed every soul he could get. Being lord of a wasteland was pointless. To turn that barren dirt into a kingdom, these people would be his foundation. He only had 50 artifacts now, but he intended to equip every family and educate them for the future. Asia looked completely dazzled. Errol couldn't fathom why his basic logistics were so surprising to her. He wasn't about to perish in some frozen hellscape. He would dominate the land that was now his. Asia saw a visionary. Errol was just planning for his own ultimate comfort. He had goals. To live a life of luxury and laziness, he needed a trained workforce to handle the heavy lifting early on. All the pieces were set. Now he just had to wait for the big reveal. Errol knew that leaving the nest was never easy. The weight of saying goodbye to his family finally started to sink in. His mother entered, pulling him into a desperate embrace. She begged to plead his case to the emperor once more. He comforted her, promising to send letters. With a year still ahead, there was no need for tears just yet. He kept his exact coordinates a secret, promising to reveal the truth once he had officially settled in. That brought her some peace. Meanwhile, Princess Kanya was currently in the middle of a total meltdown. She was obliterating everything in sight, screaming for a fresh opponent to test her mounting rage. She demanded they strike with lethal intent. She couldn't stomach the thought of him being exiled by those slimy nobles. She understood his predicament, but that didn't stop the burning resentment from boiling over in her heart. The betrayal stung. He'd known for 6 months and only just told her. Her fury was reaching its limit. He'd stayed quiet to avoid this exact volcanic explosion. In reality, Errol knew how terrifying she could be. Kanya wouldn't let him leave so easily. Her aura began to spiral, suffocating everyone in the training hall. When pure emotion hits its breaking point, mana surges and explodes outward in a violent wave. It happened. The Empire's youngest swordmaster was born, ranking 3rd in all of history. A literal legend had awakened. Her obsession with her little brother had triggered a power surge that would change the world forever. To Errol, that familiar sensation felt like a ghost from his past life. His departure date loomed closer. Time flew, but the endless mind-numbing speeches made every second feel like an eternity. He was totally over the formality. The moment finally arrived. His coming-of-age banquet was in full swing, draped in royal luxury. Fake congratulations poured in from every corner. Errol just wanted to skip the cringe and move on with his life. He maintained a perfect royal mask while wishing everyone would just disappear. This was way worse than his first birthday. Back then, he could just fake a nap. Now he was trapped in a social cage with no escape. He had to wave and smile like a mindless puppet. The entire empire was watching this theatrical performance. Everyone was secretly celebrating the troublesome prince's departure. The fake smiles were everywhere, and they were sickening. The hypocrisy was disgusting, but seeing his mother in the crowd made him pull it together for one last show. In 30 days, these smug faces would be a distant memory. This was his glorious final countdown to freedom. Even as the Empress approached, he remained a picture of calm. She smirked, noting he was finally a man with his own territory. She poked at his mother's feelings, but Errol knew this white-haired snake never missed a chance to strike. He bowed low coolly, stating his mother was perfectly fine. No weakness would be shown to his enemy today. Leaving was inevitable, so he simply chose not to stall. The Empress masked her skepticism behind an elegant silk fan. She claimed Zale would miss him, praising Errol for supposedly improving his brother's sword skills during the ball. Apparently Zale was grateful, so the Empress decided it was time to settle the score with a parting gift. A gift Errol seriously doubted it. In this palace, nothing convenient ever came without a hidden poisonous needle. She handed him a fox fur coat, a famous luxury from the freezing, desolate wasteland he was being exiled to. The Empress's fingerprints were all over this. Zale was never the type to accept help, let alone say thank you. But with her pulling the strings, the impossible became reality. She was the Empire's ultimate puppet master. This divine gift was a blatant insult. Being mocked so openly made his blood boil with pure, silent rage. Losing his cool was not an option. Despite the internal fire, he slapped on a perfectly satisfied fake mask. He promised to thank his dear brother later. Even miles apart, family must stick together right. He spoke of blood ties and mutual support, fighting to keep his voice from trembling with sheer hatred. He imagined ripping her head off, yet he prayed fate would never force him to actually mean those words. He maintained the lie to her face. Walking to the railing, he felt the suffocating banquet finally winding down. A nagging feeling of something forgotten hit him. He turned back, finding the princess unusually silent and still. Was she mad about his sudden exit? He moved to apologize, but her eyes held a terrifying new resolve. She stood up and marched straight toward him. Whatever she was planning, it was bound to be absolutely reckless. The air shifted. He could feel it. She was about to drop a bombshell that would ruin the entire evening. The Emperor tried to intercept, barking that this was no time for drama. He told her to back off. Kanya didn't blink. Ignoring her father, she loudly declared her intention to follow Errol to the ends of the earth. Errol's brain short-circuited. He never expected this level of crazy. Surely her mother would talk some sense into her. One glance at the Empress showed she was just as blindsided. But the Emperor definitely wasn't laughing. This proposal was insane. The veins throbbing on the Emperor's forehead signaled a looming explosion of imperial fury. Resistance was futile. Among all the royal siblings, Kanya was the most stubborn once she set her mind. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Why on earth would she want to follow him into exile? The answer hit like a truck. Kanya swore to become Errol's personal knight. The Emperor shouted for her to stop. Skill with a blade didn't matter, he argued. But she cut him off, claiming she was nearly a master. The room went dead silent. Even the Emperor looked like he'd seen a ghost. A master. At her age, she was only 19. Only the late legendary Emperor had ever reached such heights so young. Princess Kanya wasn't finished. She snatched a sword from a nearby guard, ready to silence every single doubter. Violent mana flared around her. She warned everyone to move if they valued their lives. The tension was electric. One slash later, a table meters away, was firewood. Errol was speechless. The proof was undeniable. Kanya wasn't lying. She turned to her father, stating she had weighed this life-changing decision for a long time. Marrying a stranger wasn't in her cards. She'd rather brave the unknown lands to protect her little brother. She chose the path of the sword. Protecting him wasn't just a whim, it was her soul's true calling. Watching her, Errol felt a lump in his throat. One more word, and he'd actually start tearing up. She was throwing away her royal life right there. It sounded like a bad joke, but she was serious. The consequences would be massive. Did she really want this? Her bright, confident smile gave him the answer. There was no going back now. What could have possibly triggered this? Then it finally clicked. He was the cause. Errol was her entire reason. He tried to intervene, but Kanya was already locked in. She was going to prove her resolve. Stepping forward, she dropped to one knee before her brother. She began the sacred vow, swearing to serve as our hero's knight until her very last breath. It was a legendary knightly oath. Technically, it shouldn't be valid, but the weight of it was undeniable. Legally, she had zero authority. Her older sister hadn't even earned her knighthood yet. This stunt was completely unauthorized, but with witnesses everywhere, a knight's oath became binding law. A swordmaster's word is absolute. Was this entire drama just a calculated move she played? On the surface, she was protecting her brother, but she was low-key securing her own future. The room was stunned. People were shook, and some looked like they might actually faint. One problem was solved, but a new one appeared. Suddenly his eyes burned with stinging tears. A dark thought hit him. His birthday was cursed, and he never wanted to celebrate again. Life moved fast after that. Families began packing, preparing for the heartbreaking moment of departure. His mother stood firm, hiding her panic. She told him to stay strong and not worry. He promised a return, but she knew the terrifying depth of a mother's silent anxiety. She teased him about being a total crybaby. Was he really that much of a softie? Time was ticking. She begged him to seek treatment since his body was basically made of glass. He tried to hide his destination, but she already knew his secret before he spoke. With a smile, she said, "Mothers know everything." Her son was clever, so she let go. "Just stay safe," she whispered. That nearly broke him. Farewell moments always cut deep. The carriages rolled toward the Empire's frozen north where icy mountains guard the world's end. He was off to tame a wasteland, where the frozen ground literally shatters iron pickaxes. Staring out at the frost, he wondered if someone actually wanted him dead. But honestly, even if he were tossed into a volcano, he'd find a way to survive. Actually, he was just checking his magic heaters to make sure he didn't freeze to death. His sister roasted him for spending so much gold on warmth. He sat there in distress. Then he noticed it. Even in this cold, she was unconsciously shielding herself with raw mana. He never taught her that. Her survival instinct and talent were honestly terrifying to witness. She asked if this was normal. He quickly warned her never to flex like that casually. You could get punished for less. He asked if she regretted choosing this freezing life. She pinched his cheeks hard, offended he'd even ask if she was tired of him. She had abandoned everything. The princess insisted on being his personal knight in the north. He spent a day begging the emperor to stop her, but she refused to stay behind. Squeezing his face, she called it a perfect chance. He had zero clue what she meant. Then it clicked, she was escaping. If she stayed, she would have been forced into marriage. That made sense. She was 19, and honestly, it's a miracle she wasn't married off sooner. Her desperation to flee was relatable. Like him, she hated being a bird in a cage. Now the princess felt truly free. He just wondered who the unlucky groom was supposed to be. She turned away, claiming she'd reject him instantly. That man dodged a literal bullet. Living with her, she joked, would make any man beg for mercy within a week. Our hero didn't know whether to thank the unknown guy or offer him a prayer. He finally reached his estate. 1,000 soldiers and 200 slaves were now his responsibility. With his retinue and alchemists ready, it was time to build his own personal paradise. Fortifying the territory was priority number one, so he handed that job to Isia and Sina. As for the princess, no way. He didn't dare put her in charge of anything. She'd probably kick down the barracks if she got bored. Military work just wasn't her vibe. She mostly rolled around in the snow, so he focused on the local villagers instead. 10,000 people lived in 12 tiny hamlets. It was finally time for the first meeting. These hunters had been isolated for centuries. No one had moved here for 100 years. The population was crashing. This region wasn't just poor, it was slowly vanishing into oblivion. The royal court had completely abandoned hope of recovering their losses. They'd basically left this territory for dead. Our protagonist wondered if the former ruler had ever even stepped foot here. One look at the ledgers confirmed his fears. The man had utterly scorched the earth. Drowning in debt, he had signed enough loans to ensure a total collapse. Our hero thought he'd seen the worst of it, but the previous lord was a masterclass in failure. He unrolled a massive map across the table, his eyes sharpening, realizing he'd have to carry this entire burden solo. Silver lining. The population was tiny, but the timber was infinite. Maybe lumber would be his play, or even paper. In this world, high-quality paper was basically liquid gold. His current side hustles were still pulling in steady cash, so the foundation was solid. With the finances settled, he decided it was time to scout the actual people. If the last lord was a clown, someone else must have been the ghost manager. That was the exact talent he needed. He immediately issued a mandatory summons for every single village elder to gather and report to him face to face. Suddenly, the doors slammed open, revealing the giants of Ice Valley. They were massive, built like tanks, and looked capable of ripping a dire wolf in half with their bare hands. They offered a stiff greeting, and our lead began his pitch. He vowed to be a lord they could actually lean on. He knew that, to them, he just looked like a privileged brat playing at power. Honestly, looking at his youthful face, who would believe him? Then he spotted one elder who looked incredibly young. The boy explained that his father, the previous chief, had passed away just last year, leaving him in charge. Our hero didn't blink. He'd already memorized that. From the secret reports he'd studied all night. He didn't press the kid. He just needed them to know who held the leash now. We have much to settle, he stated. Since the journey had clearly drained them, he suggested they talk over a feast. He knew commoners dreaded dining with the elite. At a noble's table, every bite usually felt like a death sentence. He could already see their pure discomfort. To be fair, he wasn't hungry either, but their terrified expressions were low-key hilarious. Why so stiff? He asked, despite hating the awkward vibe himself. If only they knew how much he'd prepped for this, flanked by his knights and his sister, who was currently losing it because she'd never seen him act so serious. One man lifted a tray and froze instantly. Noticing the shock, our hero mentioned he wanted to serve a better spread, but this was the best he could manage. They responded with deep, trembling bows. Even so, he could tell they'd agree to a contract with the devil right now. Honestly, it was a humble meal. His pockets weren't deep yet. A man tasted the meat, and eyes went wide. It was heavily salted. Our hero knew that was a major flex. Salt was a rare luxury here, and salted meat was a high-tier delicacy. By eating the exact same rations, he was signaling that he wasn't just a distant ruler, but a leader who actually understood their struggle. He finally looked them in the eye. He admitted the former lord had probably made their lives a living hell. When a ruler checks out, the people pay the price, he warned. But the old ways die today. He declared that forcing them to continue the labor of the last 10 years was officially illegal. Hunting might fill their bellies for now, but it wasn't a future. From this point on, his orders would sound crazy. He only asked for one thing: trust him blindly, even if he hadn't earned it yet. As our hero stood up and delivered his fire speech, the elders stared back in total awe, as if they were witnessing a literal angel. He quickly told them to chill. He wasn't trying to start a cult. All he wanted was simple: follow the damn instructions. If they obeyed, he'd end their days of scavenging for scraps forever. His first decree: they must welcome the newcomers he'd brought. These former slaves were being integrated into the villages as free citizens. They were to live in peace with their families, and anyone literate would work directly for him. The elders agreed. But a shadow remained. Would the local residents truly accept them as equals, or just see them as former property? That social wall was hard to climb. To the locals, they were still pariahs. Our hero told them to relax. He wasn't going in without a strategy. He made a subtle signal, and the headmen instantly understood. Seconds later, they promised to give it their all. As they walked out together, they were still reeling from the shock. Were all the old lords like this one? Asked. The headman shook his head, calling our hero downright bizarre. Most nobles viewed this land as a prison sentence. The previous lord was trash, but this one, he was something else. That total idiot left the place in ruins, leaving the citizens to suffer. Now a fresh lord has finally arrived. This kid just hit adulthood, and honestly, things looked bleak. Why the heck did our MC even show up here? The people prayed he wouldn't be another clown like the last guy. But one look into our hero's eyes, and they knew he was built different. Still, true hope felt far away. All they could do was watch and pray he knew what he was doing. Our MC started grinding through the paperwork, sorted by his staff. He was chilling with his head in Cena's lap, total baby vibes, but the intel he was scanning was dead serious. On paper, 10,000 people lived here. In reality, barely 9,600 souls remained. Counting the outskirts, maybe 9,800. Cena claimed this dip was normal when a new lord took over. People always ghost, but where did they vanish to? Plus, birth rates were absolutely bottoming out, and the territory's crushing poverty was the clear culprit. Even with 450,000 gold in his pocket, that bag could only last 50 years. Those noble snakes sent him here on purpose, hoping he'd drown in this mess. They definitely wanted him gone permanently. If agriculture flopped, it was game over. Cena noted the previous lord went bankrupt trying to force crops. Our hero knew that guy was just a massive fool. Foraging and hunting were their only lifelines, but could that really be their only way to make bank? It was time to trigger his secret strategy. The first fix for this dying land was obvious: the roads. Potholes were everywhere, no signs, no repairs, just straight-up chaos. Nobody had bothered to fix a single mile. Our hero finally dropped his plan and submitted the proposal. The locals were absolutely stunned. The lord was actually hiring them and offering a top-tier salary. This was the move he'd teased earlier. If he was footing the bill, why not give it a shot? Soon the construction was already in full swing. People feared this massive project would take forever, but our MC didn't care about the timeline. He promised every worker their fair share. The crowd cheered. Our hero realized that in this world, money is pure power. He enjoyed watching the hustle from afar. That's just how it goes if you want the prize, you put in the work. Once the roads were paved, travel would be a breeze, signaling it was time for stage 2. Step 2 of the grand plan: launching a massive trading company. One man spoke up, doubting this wasteland was built for trade. Our hero basically told him to shut it and get busy, then handed him a fat stack of cash. For now, they just needed to secure the locals' daily essentials. By controlling the trade through his own firm, they'd take a massive leap forward. Meanwhile, our hero moved to his next move. To save this territory, he asked Damon if his wild idea was even possible. Damon scanned the blueprints and realized the MC wanted to manufacture paper. Real paper existed, but it was low-quality trash, made by just steaming and pressing random fibers. Since it was imported tech, nobody in the Empire truly mastered it. Because of the insane price, only the top 1% could afford it. It was mostly gatekept by the Imperial Library. Most people were stuck using parchment only when absolutely necessary. Damon knew paper was a literal goldmine, and mass-producing it would be insanely profitable. One tiny problem: no one actually knew the recipe. So, did our hero have a secret trick up his sleeve? He stood up, asking if Damon really thought he'd bring this up without a foolproof plan. Competitors, please. They were going to revolutionize the industry. He told Damon to speak his mind, but first check out the insane machinery they'd need. Damon admitted the design was cracked, but building it was another story. They were alchemists after all. Potions and meds were their bread and butter, but complex engineering, that was a whole different beast. The local smiths couldn't forge anything this advanced. But if they could recruit dwarves from the capital, maybe. Hearing that name, our hero realized the Empire actually had a few of those legendary craftsmen, and they took custom jobs. Legend says they can craft anything, no matter how impossible the specs. He decided this was exactly why he had a massive budget and went to get the funds ready. But you couldn't just throw gold at dwarves. Sure, they loved the shiny stuff, but their pride was the real gatekeeper. They only took jobs that let them flex their skills, so our hero was told to keep his gold tucked away. If they hated the request, they'd decline instantly, regardless of status. Our MC was baffled. Was dwarven ego truly that massive? Did they prioritize coin over legendary growth? Is soul-crushing labor for gold their only path? He knew if the gold stopped, regret would follow soon. When Damon offered to pitch the schematics to his dwarf contacts, our lead finally felt a spark. Damon bet those plans would ignite their curiosity. Fast forward to a soot-stained forge deep in a dwarven town. A gruff chief roared at his crew to stop slacking. Productivity meant less headache for his own intense workload. Suddenly, a messenger arrived. The chief scoffed, assuming some annoying imperial noble was making more entitled demands. "Tell them I will reply in a year," he spat. But the messenger insisted this was from the legendary alchemist. The master smith remembered that man from a decade ago. Why would he reach out after all this time? His jaw dropped. Moments later, he abruptly ordered his stunned apprentice to take over the anvil immediately. He rushed out to summon the council, leaving the servant dazed. What could possibly rattle the iron-willed chief? Was that parchment some forbidden scroll? The chief's face had shifted instantly. What secrets were hidden in those lines? The council grumbled at being summoned while drowning in orders. If it was so urgent, why not go alone? "Stop the whining," the chief barked. This was not trivial. A master had sent a hand-drawn blueprint of divine quality. The request: build complex machinery in Pahelia. A fellow smith snorted, calling the entire demand absolutely unhinged and ridiculous. Did the chief really call a summit for a simple favor? But the old master's gaze was dead serious. He confessed he was skeptical too until he saw the designs. It was a revolutionary layout for high-end papermaking. "Remember 5 years ago," he whispered. He was referring to the Eastern traveler with impossible quality standards. That man demanded perfection, and the dwarves had failed. It was the only time their craft had been rejected. That defeat had crushed their spirits. Many almost retired in shame. The chief held the scroll high like a relic. This was their redemption. The god-tier technology that eluded them years ago was finally within their grasp. Now that same visionary was summoning them. He wasn't just asking, he was offering them a second shot at glory. Exhaling with a wild grin, the chief declared he would go solo if the rest were too cowardly to join. "No way," the smiths roared. "How could the busiest dwarf leave?" The chief just gave a dismissive smirk. He claimed his apprentices could manage. Silence fell, then erupted into a chaotic brawl as everyone demanded a spot. It was a volunteer frenzy. The excitement in the room was palpable. Every dwarf wanted to prove their worth. "Quiet," a gnome yelled. If everyone abandoned the shop, their entire business would collapse into ruin by morning. Only 50% could make the trip. As the debate heated up, a terrified servant peeked into the room. He witnessed total carnage. When dwarves cannot settle things with logic, they resort to the language of fists. This was the iron law of the mountain. Brute force decided everything, especially for these seasoned old masters. The worker quietly retreated, closing the door on the chaos. Back at the mansion, our hero sat idling. He knew a response would take days. What should a man do with free time? Easy embrace. Absolute laziness. Doing nothing was his specialty. With the forge on hold, he could finally indulge in some well-deserved relaxation. He felt a twinge of guilt but dismissed it. He had survived hell for this peaceful, lazy afternoon. A piercing shriek shattered the quiet. Had his pet griffin suddenly developed the lungs of a banshee? He looked up to see the beast soaring at terminal velocity. The height was absolutely terrifying and unnatural. Expert riders could push limits, but no fledgling griffin could hit those speeds without some insane external force. It was insane. The princess was literally yeeting the poor creature into the sky to teach it flight. "What are you doing to it?" he shouted. Had the beast sinned? The princess just blinked innocently. "It is just training," she claimed. "How was launching it like a missile training?" Let us rewind for context. With the power transition underway, the princess was the only one without a pile of boring administrative paperwork. Her routine was chaotic: binge eating, brutal sword drills, and sleep. Rinse and repeat for the girl who hates stillness. Boredom was her ultimate enemy. Unfortunately, she spotted the innocent griffin frolicking in the courtyard at the worst time. Thus, the griffin's nightmare began. She figured a future war mount could not afford to be this sluggish and lazy. Her logic was terrifying. Our MC realized he should have prioritized common sense over combat training for his sister. Still, with everyone else occupied, maybe this was the perfect moment to actually bond with his chaotic sibling. For once, peace reigned. He wondered, how do normal siblings even bond? Back in his first life, he walked alone as an only child. Past incarnations gave him kin, yet those bridges were icy. Normal in those lives was far from cozy. Total indifference until the grave was the standard. Even a seasoned pro like him felt clueless. He released the weary griffin, granting the beast its freedom at last. "Go fly high," he urged, saving the exhausted creature. Eyeing his sister, he vowed to actually be a decent sibling this time. "Let's play something," he proposed with a grin. He initiated a game of chess, but anything involving deep logic felt like pure agony to the princess. Crash. The board went flying. "I loathe this game," she roared, forcing our hero to raise the white flag. He wasn't exactly thrilled either, but in the frozen north, options were slim. Chess was just a shield against boredom. "Don't sweat it," he reassured, suggesting she utilize the mental enhancement artifact he'd gifted her earlier, a tool to sharpen her focus. Honestly, it was futile. His tactical prowess spanned lifetimes, a gap no item could bridge. Was he pulling his punches too much? Maybe. But as the next round began, disaster struck from within. The mana stone shattered. Fury ignited her gaze as she unsheathed her blade in a silver flash. The board was sliced into 4 equal chunks. Despair washed over him. Chess was his last hope for sharpening her mind. She played the innocent card perfectly before dropping the hammer. Chess was officially banned. Stunned, he scrambled for an alternative. "So, what do you actually do for fun?" he ventured cautiously. "Training." Her blunt reply left him reeling. Did this girl ever take a breather from the grind? Before he could spiral, his stomach let out a thunderous growl, sparking a brilliant, if risky, new idea. "Let's cook." Her face paled. For a warrior who feared nothing, the kitchen was uncharted, terrifying territory. She hesitated, but he stood firm. A true knight must master the hearth as well as the sword. Knights aren't just decorative guards. They're survivalists, stalking beasts across savage frontiers. Week-long expeditions are common. "Plan on starving out there," he teased, driving the point home. Without basic culinary skills, she was a walking hazard to her own stomach. Survival starts at the pot. This was a mandatory life lesson. She looked utterly miserable, yet the princess reluctantly bowed to logic. "I've got your back," he promised, though the irony of a younger brother playing teacher wasn't lost on him. Donning his apron with pride, our hero declared their mission. They were whipping up a legendary meat stew. A humble, hearty recipe with basic ingredients, the ultimate comfort food for a weary soldier on campaign. Simple, satisfying, and foolproof. It was the perfect entry point for a royal novice. He prayed for 0 kitchen fires. Surprisingly, her blade work on the vegetables was sharp and precise. A knight's precision indeed. He coached her through every stir and simmer, maintaining a steady rhythm. The final product looked edible. "Not bad," he nodded. "Keep this up, and you'll survive any journey." Even the longest march wouldn't stand a chance against her newfound culinary skills. Mission accomplished. With his sister fed and happy, he prepared for a glorious, well-deserved 1-hour nap. Suddenly, a panicked servant burst in. The do not disturb order had been shattered by sheer desperation. Something massive was going down. Only a crisis could justify interrupting his precious downtime. "Speak." The news hit him like a hammer. A dwarven delegation had arrived at the gates. Worse yet, they were threatening to turn the messenger into mincemeat if the hero didn't show up immediately. He reeled. Why were they so early? Regardless, their arrival meant his gamble had paid off. Time to pivot. Nap cancelled. He hadn't expected the bearded folk this soon, but the plan was moving. He went to welcome them, but the dwarves bypassed etiquette, marching right into his personal space. "Are you the brat who drew this?" they barked. Asia, witnessing the disrespect, saw red. "Apologize for your insolence," she commanded. The lead dwarf sensed her overwhelming aura instantly. Her bloodlust rose, but dwarves don't bow to human titles. To them, noble status was just noise. Formalities were useless here. Stepping in, the hero cut through the tension before things turned bloody. These guests were vital. If the bickering continued, Asia might actually turn them into a midnight snack. Calming the storm, he finally locked eyes with the dwarves. "I drew it. Every single line." Naturally, the dwarves weren't having any of it. They roared for proof, certain this was just some petty human prank. Demanding the true master appear at once, they scoffed at our hero. Even as he insisted, their disbelief remained rock solid. A scrawny kid designing this. He looked too fragile to lift a hammer. Fed up, our hero signaled Asia to step in. He just needed to break the ice and end this deadlock. Even the butlers intervened. Finally, the dwarves leveled one final piercing question. Was he really the mastermind behind the blueprints? He was drained, having already tossed out 7 different piles of ironclad proof. He wondered why they'd rushed there so fast. Had he known a grand welcome and warm beds would have been waiting for them, at least enough time to breathe. But the dwarves cut to the chase. Did he want this machine built, or was he wasting time? "Exactly why I summoned you. Human hands lacked the finesse for this masterpiece." Seeing his point, the dwarf's stern face finally cracked a grin. Since these components were beyond human capability, he wondered, was this stubborn dwarf just flexing his legendary racial pride? He fired back, a human brain is the ultimate weapon for innovation. After all, he was a certified genius. Unapologetically flexing, he claimed every stroke of that blueprint was born from his own brilliant, high IQ mind. a true mastermind. He even teased that this was just the beginning, a mere fraction of his endless secret inventions. The dwarf actually nodded. Given how eccentric and loud-mouthed this kid was, he fit the crazy genius trope perfectly. Instantly, the tension evaporated. Flattery was the key to unlocking a dwarf's loyalty. Truthfully, they were already hooked. The contract was all but signed. But as he began to explain the specifics, the dwarf abruptly raised a hand, cutting him off. The verdict was in. They'd traveled this far, so the job was theirs. Money hadn't even been mentioned yet. And it didn't even matter. They were ready to sign whatever. These craftsmen only cared about projects that ignited their creative fire. If he could dream up this machine, they were desperate to see his other designs, seizing the moment to impress them further. Our hero revealed this was just one page of his library. There was plenty more where that came from. The dwarves fell deathly silent. They confessed hidden clues or not, they needed to see those designs immediately. Their eyes were blazing with pure, unadulterated hype. He whipped out a new scroll. As the dwarves lunged for it like hungry wolves, he snatched it back with a smirk. Not so fast, fellas. The dwarf's fingers twitched to grab the parchment, but our hero made it clear it could wait. Step 1. Finish the current project. Only when the first machine was standing tall and fully operational would he unveil the rest. The dwarf slammed the table in frustration. This negotiation tactic was absolutely infuriating. With a sly grin, he reminded them that a genius's trust is earned, not given. The dwarf turned away, barking a final wait and see. They vowed to build it in record time. Their eyes were literally burning with motivation. Our hero couldn't hide his excitement. The design was his ultimate trump card. He'd initially planned to reveal everything, but he pivoted to a much craftier strategy. He'd dangle the remaining designs as bait. Knowing this would double their speed, he quietly congratulated himself for such a devious plan. To the dwarves, he was a cruel taskmaster. But for him, everything was proceeding exactly according to his master plan. The dwarves became frequent guests, their faces showing the toll of endless sleepless nights. But as soon as one machine was finished, he immediately slapped down another project. He even joked about their lack of sleep since they kept barging in on him. Whether he was napping, bathing, or busy with private matters, they were there. He truly couldn't fathom why they looked so unhinged, especially since they crushed the build in under 10 days. Finally, the world's first paper-making machine was born. The results were in. Demon held the fruits of their labor, a stack of incredibly crisp, clean paper. Our hero felt pure pride. He had conceptualized it all. Never mind how the dwarves actually engineered that complex conveyor belt, it was a total success. Standard paper required slow manual drying sheet by sheet. But his machine, it churned out massive batches in record time. The quality was flawless, stark, perfect white. They were sitting on a gold mine since their land was overflowing with premium timber. It was the perfect spot for a massive paper factory. When asked if the results met his standards, our hero replied that he needed a few more upgrades. The dwarf looked ready to explode, but victory was just a matter of time. Soon their paper would dominate every shelf. All that was left was securing trade routes to start raking in that sweet cash. Word spread fast that he needed a sales lead. Candidates flocked to him, but his own uncle was the first to step up. Dispatched by his mother, this maternal relative was curious about the product, but our hero was about to blow his mind. He unveiled something beyond his uncle's wildest dreams. At a lower price and higher quality, this would spark a market revolution. Competitors were going to be livid. With paper demand skyrocketing and prices reaching insane heights, the timing was absolutely perfect. Old-school production was just too labor-intensive. Now, as sales surged and costs climbed everywhere else, he held the ultimate advantage. Even his uncle bled cash for a small stash. It was straight-up luxury at this point. One slip in quality meant a total scandal, but our MC didn't even flinch. Complaints impossible. This paper was a literal game-changer, unlike anything on the market. High-tier quality without the insane markup. His uncle realized this was a god-tier monopoly. Could it get any better? His uncle's eyes sparked as he instantly drafted a master plan. With these budget prices, they could dominate regions where paper was once a myth. Staring at a natural-born hustler, he could trust the MC knew it was finally payday. Finally, the dwarves had finished forging the advanced machinery he'd been dreaming of. The ink on the blueprints wasn't even dry. Were those guys really back already? No victory, feast, or legendary dinner. The dwarves just shrugged. Duty was calling. Their students were holding down the fort, but they needed to return. Still, one promise remained. If he had more fun projects, they'd be back in a heartbeat. Then they vanished. He'd hoped for a party, but work comes first. Now the real phase begins. The moment the paper hit the shelves, the entire city stood frozen in shock. No ink bleeds, zero tearing. This wasn't just paper, it was a masterpiece of craft. High society was buzzing. Every royal was whispering about the legendary new Lord of Philia. New roads in a wasteland. They couldn't believe a kid was carrying this entire territory. Even the king felt the difference in his hands. He summoned his butler for answers. The butler didn't skip a beat. He knew exactly where this revolutionary stationery came from. It was cheaper, stronger, and better. The king demanded to know the source. The answer came fast. This was the handiwork of the new ruler in Philia. The king beamed, that was his boy, plus Philia was finally ready to pay taxes. He was hyped, though he couldn't process how Philia transformed into a gold mine so fast. While the king celebrated, our MC lay awake, feeling like someone was definitely plotting his downfall. Honestly, he was just happy he could finally afford all the honey he wanted. Meanwhile, the queen sipped tea with her son, the very tea our MC had gifted her. Her son assumed Philia was a graveyard. The queen faltered, barely keeping her cool. Her mind raced with ways to erase the MC and his mother. Her son sensed the tension. She mask-oned immediately, reminding him he was the future emperor sitting right there. A future ruler needs a legendary blade, she said. He had to embody imperial power. The second he left, the queen snapped, trashing the table in a fit of pure rage. Everyone loved Philia's paper. Every time she heard his name, her blood started to boil. She smashed her cup to pieces. Meet Aaliyah Pratt, a woman with a deadly secret. The Pratt family held the monopoly on paper. They had zero competition in the realm. Their only real rival was the Eastern Empire, but their goods were banned after the war. She'd bribed everyone else into silence. Now a random kid was ruining her entire empire. How did Errol pull this off? She couldn't sit idly by while he destroyed her business. She grabbed her pen to scheme, while Errol was already back at the slave market. 6 months of heavy spending had turned him into a VIP. People bowed when he walked in. He didn't mince words, I need manpower. The merchant asked if he had a type. He wanted warriors, men built like tanks who could survive the most brutal winters. The merchant was baffled, but our MC's gaze was sharp and unwavering. These men were for the front lines, protecting the roads and securing the new paper factories. Philia's army was thin. Since he ranked as a count, he could legally raise 50,000. The merchant gulped. So, how many men do you need? Errol flashed 5 fingers. The merchant expected 500, but our protagonist corrected him. It was actually 5,000. The seller nearly choked on that astronomical figure, while Errol stood composed, masked by a faint, calculating smile. Naturally, the merchant scrambled to fulfill the massive order, proving to Errol once again a harsh reality. In this world, gold is the ultimate law. Later, he turned his focus to testing lethal dwarven forged blades. Their craftsmanship was legendary. By then, the massive wave of new laborers had already assembled outside. They bowed before their new sovereign lord, Errol. He watched them, eyes gleaming with the hope of an empire. He needed them strong enough to hold the line. For now, the heavy lifting was done, time to rest. As shadows stretched at twilight, a group of silhouettes crept toward the protagonist's high-stakes paper mill. These saboteurs had one goal: raid the Philia factory and make the priceless machinery vanish into thin air. Their objective was to bankrupt Errol's economy. Assuming the place was defenseless, they anticipated a total cakewalk. They dreamed of retiring early on the bounty. After a quick scout, they moved in for the kill. Spotting only 2 measly guards, the intruders pounced from the darkness, striking both targets simultaneously. With the guards dealt with, they breached the interior only to find a haunting silent void. Suddenly, steel flashed. Knights swarmed from the shadows, a perfect trap. The attackers were paralyzed by the sudden ambush. Amidst the chaos, Errol stepped forward. The cornered rats instantly folded, begging for their lives like cowards. Errol felt zero pity. They'd breached his borders, assaulted his people, and trashed his land. Cold justice was served. He demanded they be dragged to the dungeons for a brutal interrogation. He wanted every single secret they held. Errol headed home, leaving the cleanup to his men. He despised bloodshed, but certain lines are never crossed. Threaten his inner circle, and he becomes a nightmare. Those unbreakable principles defined his reign in this life. He'd endured too much to falter now. By sunrise, the truth was extracted, and the verdict was finalized. Their sentence, life in chains. Ironically, they would spend their remaining days as the very slaves they'd mocked. However, the masterminds remained hidden in the fog. Errol realized he'd need a much sharper strategy to win. There was a silver lining: his treasury was finally overflowing. Funding for his grand expansion was no longer an issue. The grind never stops, but first he had to activate a certain forbidden teleportation circle. Goblin engineering didn't come cheap, and the mana cost was insane, but Errol knew this investment was vital. Every magical component was prime grade. He pushed aside any doubts this was his ticket back home. He slotted the final magic stone into place. The ancient mechanism hummed, glowing with a blinding ethereal light. Now for the destination. He summoned Kanya, though his sister looked like she'd seen a ghost. She hesitated, second-guessing the journey, but Errol maintained his trademark trust-me calm demeanor. He promised it was a walk in the park, a quick flash, and they'd be there, no big deal, right? Kanya was still vibrating with fear, so Errol grabbed her hand and pulled her into the swirling vortex. Just focus, he commanded. Kanya squeezed her eyes shut, her knuckles turning white as they warped through space. He whispered one last reassurance about the safety. The only catch: a little bit of magical motion sickness. The jump began. Kanya was so terrified she practically choked him, turning the smooth trip into pure chaos. A heartbeat later, they hit solid ground. Back home at last, and Kanya finally stopped her, panicked, screaming. Memories of his youth hit him like a truck. Overwhelmed, Errol dropped down and literally kissed the dirt. The biting cold was finally gone. Nanny rushed out, beaming, reporting that the magic stones were successfully synced. She announced that Lady Phanelia was waiting. Errol suggested they split up, much to his sister's annoyance. His heart was racing for one reason: he needed to see his mother and ensure she was safe. He burst through the doors and pulled his mother into a crushing hug. The reunion was pure cinematic emotion. She already knew his exploits. Apparently, Uncle had been snitching via letters about everything in the duchy. Errol wondered how that workaholic uncle found time to write. The man was probably skipping meals again. Still, Errol wanted to tell his story his way. He wanted her to hear the real truth. They walked into the gardens where Errol painted a picture of endless snow and majestic white rabbits. He just forgot to mention, those cute bunnies were actually 3-meter-tall monsters. Some secrets are better kept. Errol detailed his triumphs, Philia's exotic wildlife, and the local tribes he'd befriended. It was music to her ears. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed, the queen, the last person he wanted nearby. She feigned total shock, though Errol knew his message had reached every corner of the palace. Sensing a trap, he struck first, inquiring about the king and the first prince's recent rise to power. The queen wasted no time asserting her dominance, making it clear the palace was still under her thumb. She probed about his territory's skyrocketing economy, and without missing a beat, Errol confirmed the rumors. He credited his proprietary tech for the success, noting that the entire empire was absolutely obsessed with his new products. He framed it perfectly just to watch the queen squirm. The prince she once tossed aside was now systematically dismantling her family's business empire. Errol's paper was simply on another level. Switching tactics, the queen feigned concern about dangerous bandits. Errol just gave a dry thanks coolly, stating he had everything on lock. With that, she vanished. But not before dropping a final icy warning. His mother immediately sensed the empress was fuming. Errol played it off as family drama, but internally he was locked in for her challenge. Time was a luxury he didn't have. Errol bid his mother farewell, knowing he had to head home. He teased Kanya about her trip earning a swift smack, though he'd actually been worried sick. After the maid's report, his overactive imagination had cooked up some truly wild, tragic scenarios. The portal began to flicker and fade, signaling the end of their journey. A few days later, back at Philia Manor, a massive new hurdle emerged. They desperately needed a mage, and fast. Only a mage could stabilize their teleportation circles. Plus, they needed magic to supercharge their crop yields. They'd even help grow the special timber for his paper production. Talk about an ultimate helper. In a monster siege, a mage's raw power would be the ultimate game changer. The real puzzle, finding a caster that versatile, was nearly impossible. Errol hit the books but found 0 leads. He was stuck, but quitting wasn't an option. High-tier nobles always had magical backing. He had to find one, but the price tag was insane. Hiring just one mage cost a fortune. Guarding a territory this vast would take a whole squad. Ultimately, this was all to protect his paper factory. Warriors are great, but what if a rival mage attacks? Swords were fine, but magic was the missing piece. Philia officially began the hunt for a veteran. All that was left was to send a high-priced request to the magic tower. Errol hoped some rogue mage would find the offer tempting. Even a rookie would work for now. He was confident he could forge them into a top-tier wizard. He started blasting recruitment flyers everywhere. Locals realized the legendary paper-making lord was hiring. Potential candidates were suddenly buzzing with interest. Enter Bala, a chaotic woman who lunged at a flyer, declaring this job was her destiny. Her only goal, free food and a roof. Within days, a mountain of applications flooded in. Errol wanted them all, but first came the trials. He even planned to test their mana himself. His main goal was ensuring none of these casters would ever turn against him. He needed absolute loyalty. He handed the files to his staff for a total background sweep. Inspection day finally arrived. After a brutal screening, only 12 elite casters made the cut. They were officially on the payroll, and the hype was real. Errol stepped up to assign duties. He promised to mentor them in magic, while they guarded the lands and tended the fields. He'd respect their preferences, but first he needed a captain. Level 4s stepped forward. 2 people raised their hands. Errol's eyes locked onto a girl, sensing her raw, hidden potential. He officially welcomed his new personal magician into the fold. Her name, Daya Lecky. Don't get it twisted, this wasn't a random choice. Errol had a very specific reason for her. During the interview, Dia's vibe was different. With her stacked resume, she was way overqualified. She could have worked anywhere, so why come here? She simply said she wanted to serve him. That answer threw Errol for a loop. Usually it's about the gold, not pure devotion. Was she for real? Errol scanned her soul, searching for even a hint of a hidden agenda. She was 100% sincere. With her loyalty confirmed, he welcomed her. After the briefing, the perks were finalized, and Errol revealed a massive room overflowing with ancient knowledge. Secured via the Mage Tower, those tomes were a total steal. Honestly, bargaining with those stubborn mages was the real boss fight. The mages were hyped. Errol knew they were basically tower rejects, desperate outcasts who'd be nothing without this shot at glory. Without this, they'd have never leveled up, likely fading into obscurity forever. No wonder their energy was through the roof. This many opportunities, they never saw it coming. Errol warned he'd be tracking their progress, so they'd better keep grinding. But his low-key motive was different. He planned to use their collective brainpower to hack the deepest secrets of magic. Having mastered the basics, he hungered for advanced tier knowledge. Surrounding himself with geniuses was the ultimate shortcut. If it secured his future, the effort was worth it. Finally, the entire group stepped out into the open air. Errol tasked Daya with restoring the woods. Their paper empire was booming, but the forest was paying a heavy price. Errol asked if they were up for it. They nodded, and suddenly, massive trees began bursting from the parched earth. Errol's jaw dropped. This wasn't just basic spellcasting, they were executing a complex high-tier ecological ritual. They were delicately weaving life together. But could a tree truly materialize from nothing? The mages shook their heads. Forcing nature would drain the soil dry. The land needed a month-long nap to recharge its vital mana reserves. Even in this world, environmental balance was key. Relieved they understood, Errol shifted focus to their next mission: crops. Hunting alone couldn't sustain Fahelia's people forever. They needed a massive harvest to survive. One mage looked puzzled. She asked if she only had to boost one field, but Errol's vision was grander, accelerated growth across 12 villages. He quickly backpedaled, realizing the scale was insane. They just needed to help the locals prep the perfect agricultural environment. After Errol laid out the specs, the mages crunched the numbers. Verdict: totally doable as long as they managed mana efficiently. Simultaneously, Errol unveiled the specialized tools for the job. His primary strat: a magical shield to manipulate the climate. The barrier would deflect the freezing cold while trapping sunlight and warmth. It was a literal greenhouse effect via magic. It actually worked. Overjoyed Errol, prepared to replicate this across every village to erase the threat of starvation forever. Afterward, 2 mages joined the research lab, while 3 were stationed to fortify the palace defenses and surrounding facilities. That left Daya feeling lost. Errol smirked, appointing her as his personal shadow, his elite escort and right-hand woman. Since he couldn't flex his magic publicly, he needed her as his magical proxy. Step 1. Hit the books. Daya's eyes sparkled as she swore total devotion to her studies. Her intense vibes caught Errol completely off guard. Why so serious? Then it hit him, she was reading his own book. For most knights, that manual was a flop. Nobody understood his theories. He questioned why a non-knight even wanted it. Daya revealed a friend had passed it down. She explained that, while knights and mages used mana differently, the core mechanics for magicians were strikingly similar. The underlying energy system was identical. Errol's revolutionary theory was finally being validated by someone else. The mana systems weren't truly different, proving Errol's theory right. He'd actually reached that same conclusion alone. Daya confessed the book was her Bible. She'd literally crossed the entire continent just to serve the author. Errol was stunned. His words had resonated that deeply. Plus, Daya was totally obsessed with the rice she was served. Her loyalty was fueled by simple joys. He just hoped his read on her character was spot on. Seated in his massive library, Errol devoured stacks of lore until the world's hidden mechanics finally began to click. He decided to analyze Daya's magic flow first. After imprinting her method, he managed to mirror her spell instantly. He was basically a pro now. However, practicing magic carelessly was a death wish, so he returned to the fundamentals. A short jump later, Errol arrived in Ernestie's capital, heading straight for the dwarf iron factory. His bodyguard looked tilted. She still hated the dwarves for their past disrespect. Errol played peacemaker, but the factory's suffocating heat hit like a wall. They were greeted by Ben, a veteran smith with 15 years on the grind. Both Errol and his escort felt bad. Working 15 years in that fiery hell was absolute insanity. Ben then led the group toward a heavy door. The master dwarf was waiting behind it. Errol admitted he'd hurried over because the dwarf's letter screamed with extreme impatience. Behind that door, the master sat brooding. Errol explained he'd rushed over due to the dwarf's obvious extreme impatience. Did he expect a delay? The dwarf skipped small talk, poured the wine, and demanded they get to the point. He wanted the truth now. As the dwarf raised his glass, Errol finally dropped his ambitious proposal on the table. He offered to recruit half the dwarven workforce. The response: a blunt, immediate no from the master. The dwarf scoffed, refusing to deal with someone who seemed drunk on delusion, but then Errol began to clarify. Errol set his sights on half the dwarven workforce. The dwarf slammed the table, demanding to know what bait could drag them to this frozen wasteland. Errol smiled. Money was just the beginning. The golden ticket was technology and Damascus steel. The dwarf was stunned. Errol mastered this during alchemy studies. A mentor once revealed that dwarves would cross oceans just for a taste of those legendary metals. Since dwarves craved the ultimate craft, Errol dropped the bombshell. He knew the secret to that steel. He promised advanced blueprints and lost tech. The dwarf's eyes widened, his jaw practically hitting the floor. Was it a bluff? Errol countered coolly. He held the knowledge while they possessed the master craftsmanship. A legendary alliance was born. Hooked by the vision, the dwarves finally sat down to sign the contract. Intense haggling ensued until a 5-year pact was forged. The chief dwarf finally broke the silence, announcing he'd mobilize his clan within 30 days. Meanwhile, Kanya had already stormed into the royal palace. Venting her frustration to the guards, she ranted about being cooped up like a caged bird. She barged into Errol's chambers only to find Daya literally spoon-feeding him like a pampered infant. Daya was even levitating him to get dressed. Kanya froze as magic whisked them toward the table. Her brother's laziness was peak cringe. The audacity rose when he casually announced it was bath time. Instantly, Kanya and the guards swarmed him for answers. Daya just blinked, looking completely oblivious. As Errol felt the heat of their glares, he nervously asked what sparked this sudden interrogation. Kanya pinned him to the table, demanding why he'd become a magical puppet. Errol was totally baffled. Was Daya failing? She was a perfectionist in her service, but Kanya screamed that wasn't the issue. Had he forgotten how to walk? Errol stuttered about the bathroom, while Kanya face-planted in pure despair. Errol defended his lifestyle since Daya never complained. The guards, however, weren't having any of it. They insisted this was wrong. Looming over Daya, they warned her that such intimate service was problematic. Publicly, this looked scandalous. The realization of the guards' panic finally started sinking into Errol's head. He tried laughing it off, but Kanya snapped. No more magic, and no more easy life. Even Daya was banned. The poor girl turned ghost white, looking like her world had just shattered. Was she fired? Errol realized his lazy habits were problematic. He'd basically become a human doll, letting Daya handle every movement as if he were paralyzed. Kanya agreed completely, but Daya's physical strength left everyone speechless whenever she moved her master. She used mana to keep his muscles from atrophying. Kanya still loathed using magic for chores. Daya stood her ground firmly. Errol knew Kanya had just wounded a proud mage's professional ego. Another girl piped up, questioning why Daya was so obsessed with being the master's personal mage. Errol tried to mediate, but they ignored him. Kanya demanded cold, hard proof of Daya's worth. Daya wouldn't back down. She instantly produced a mountain of paperwork to prove her absolute efficiency. She processed them instantly. Unimpressed, Kanya pivoted the challenge into a high-stakes cooking showdown. The table was set instantly with a gourmet feast. Satisfied, Errol finally slipped out for air. Outside, the guards confessed Kanya's suspicions. A mysterious incident from 2 days ago had everyone on edge. The palace's brand-new security grid had been sabotaged, and all fingers were pointing at the mage. Errol doubted it, but the guards were wary, especially after that ominous letter arrived from above. The magic tower demanded her return. Errol scoffed. Were they really panicking over a single piece of mail? They'd shown her the letter, but Daya's poker face remained stone-cold and completely unreadable. Kanya trusted her but couldn't fathom Daya's motives. Why was she so dedicated to this service? Errol joked it was his riz, but deep down he sensed zero malice from her heart. Kanya's real issue was a deep-seated fear of magic. Errol stood up, finally understanding her perspective. He needed a moment to process everything before making a final call on Daya's fate. The time for secrets was over. Meanwhile, a different drama was brewing in the neighboring room. Daya's living quarters were strangely empty, yet she remained as bright and cheerful as ever. She beamed, riding the high of passing Kanya's brutal trial. To her, talent beat gold every time. Meanwhile, Errol sensed Kanya's simmering jealousy over the new recruit. Dia suspected the Black Mage's shadow loomed over this, a dark secret whispered through the tower. It wasn't just rumors. The entire magic tower was buzzing with news of that infamous assault. Errol vowed to smooth things over, but Dia cut him off. She didn't need his pity. She'd earn her spot with raw power. Still, Errol couldn't fathom her sudden, intense loyalty. Why did she crave to be his shadow when they were practically strangers? It was a tragic saga. It all began when the magic tower claimed her as a child. Orphaned by plague and starving, she was scouted solely for her untapped raw mana potential. She mastered the arcane but failed at everything else, becoming an outcast in her own home. Labeled a failure, she was relegated to cleaning floors. Errol was floored by the injustice. How could a mage this gifted be discarded? 2 years ago, she was a lowly beginner. Now she had reached level 4. She urged him to listen as the plot thickened. Tower theory was a dead end until she stumbled upon a book written by Errol himself. Errol froze. This girl had transcended her limits using nothing but his discarded writings. Was she a hidden genius, someone who evolved alone while the world stayed blind? Dia confessed this was why her devotion to her true master was absolute. Upon hitting level 4, she vanished, ignoring the teacher who tried to cage her. That man was pure filth. Her only mission after escaping was to track Errol down. After braving hell, she finally saw his notice. He was her salvation, her true north. Becoming a real mage brought her pure joy. But could she ever tell Kanya? Words weren't enough to bridge that gap. Dia knew only action could prove her worth. The burden was too heavy. Errol stepped out, promising to keep her past a secret. Under the veil of night, he summoned a veteran mage to uncover the full truth. The report was grim. She was treated like trash, and her mentor was a total villain. She'd forged her own path, defecting from the tower without a single ounce of fear. The tower's penalty was lethal, stripping half a mage's soul as tax for leaving. Errol resolved to protect her. At dawn, he found Daya already facing Kanya in battle. This was the endgame, a pure magic duel to decide her fate once and for all. Errol scrambled for help, but the other girls stayed back. This was Kanya's stage. Daya struck first, her eyes burning with a new, fierce determination. Arcane auras collided, shaking the earth, but the outcome was completely unexpected. Their combined power missed, striking the shadows beneath the palace walls instead. The veil lifted. Hiding in the gloom was the predator himself, Master Dai. This was the monster from Daya's past. Errol's blood began to boil with rage. Dai flashed a forged decree demanding the runaway return to the tower for judgment. Dia spat back in defiance. He'd abandoned her, yet now he dared claim ownership. As the snake began to hiss insults, Errol stepped in his presence, crushing the tension. No one insulted his people. Suddenly Dai lunged, grabbing Daya's wrist with a sneer. He mocked Errol's lack of manners, threatening divine punishment. Big mistake. Errol swiped the man's hand away, declaring Daya was under his exclusive personal contract. Dai gasped. Without the tower's blessing, such a contract was illegal, or so he thought. Errol smirked. He'd already secured the tower's official seal of approval weeks ago. He ordered the trash to leave his kingdom before things got messy. Dai snapped. He smashed summon orbs, calling forth massive golems. The tower would have its prize. Errol instinctively scratched his ear as tension peaked. Okania barked orders, sending the girls to smash the golems and wreck that mage. The mage smirked, expecting the golem to crush Errol, but Dia vaporized it with a sudden flash of magic. Charging her former mentor, she sealed him inside a roaring vortex. The mage realized he was completely cornered. Panic-stricken, he burned an emergency teleport scroll to vanish. The girls fumed, cursing the coward for slipping away. Errol waved off their frustration. Dia bowed low, drowning in guilt, but her master offered a reassuring smile. They'd sensed that creep lurking earlier, giving Dia the perfect stage to flex her true potential. Okania softened, offering her new ally a nod. Meanwhile, the disgraced mage crashed into a frozen woodland. Fuming over Dia's betrayal, he spotted a shadow in the canopy and unleashed a desperate magical blast. He missed. Our hero had personally tracked him down, ready to end this with a single lethal fireball. The projectile landed with pinpoint accuracy. With the threat neutralized, life resumed, with Dia faithfully by Errol's side. Okania laid down the law against reckless magic. Dia still couldn't believe she hadn't triggered a total disaster. Errol quickly calmed her nerves. Grateful Dia swore to serve him with unwavering loyalty from that day forward. Errol never expected such high-tier devotion from a mage. Suddenly, the sky shifted, signaling a change in atmosphere. The conditions were ideal for a real power test. Errol unleashed an aura so massive it felt suffocating. The surrounding woods nearly ignited from the heat. Staring into the foliage, he decided the games were over. Bitter memories of being watched resurfaced. The queen was still breathing down his neck, refusing to back off. Since she was targeting his mother, Errol flipped the switch. He threw up a massive barrier to begin. Soaring over the queen's estate, he rained down hellish fireballs. Pure chaos and terror gripped everyone inside. Cloaked in invisibility and spamming stun magic, Errol played with them like a predator mocking its prey. He slipped into the royal vault for some loot. Meanwhile, the king received a very cryptic delivery. The parchment contained specific song lyrics our protagonist had gifted to the queen as a final insult. Shaken, the queen crumpled to the floor. She feared the king was dead, but guards confirmed his safety. The king summoned his elite mages, who estimated the attacker's level at 6. Errol just stood there smirking. A glowing blue grate hummed, packed with supplies. The citizens had seriously outdone themselves with the logistics. Hunger was no longer a threat. A rugged farmer approached Errol, hauling massive ears of corn over his shoulder. Shocked by the bounty from such harsh land, the man presented 2 distinct, thriving types of grain. The crops were absolute units, double their usual size. The man insisted Prince Errol was the miracle worker. Knowing the mage's secret efforts, Errol redirected the praise to everyone who had been grinding overtime. The hero gestured toward the structures, impressed by the mage's craftsmanship. Errol looked toward the horizon and beamed. The queen's lineage was finally neutralized. With his mini-empire thriving, Errol hoped this peace would last 50 years. Post-Great War, only 3 titans remained standing. These were the Urnizia Empire and the formidable Merman Empire. Then there was the Daemonel Kingdom, the weakest of the bunch. Somehow this underdog nation managed to endure. Survival had been pure luck. We shift now to Daemonel, where the Chancellor is hosting a lavish banquet. A man wearing a monocle raised a golden drink toasting the night. Beside him stood a mysterious green-haired attendant. He announced a special gift, crafted with deep respect, then signaled a maid to step forward. He urged her to present the package. The girl revealed a box containing a very peculiar jar. The Chancellor grinned as he inspected it. This was a rare elixir, usually exclusive to the Arnesia Kingdom. Applied to the scalp, this legendary tonic could spark instant hair growth. It was the ultimate baldness cure. The green-haired man begged him to accept. The Chancellor obliged, knowing this luxury item cost a fortune. He asked for the price of this favor. The man just smirked, claiming he wanted absolutely nothing back. Mentioning his son's deployment next year, he admitted some anxiety. The Chancellor's gaze sharpened as he grinned. The Chancellor noted the request as the party roared on under the warm glow of the lamps. The golden liquor sparkled, tasting like pure luxury. Lately, high-end imports from Arnesia had flooded their markets. Smuggling was booming. That same year, the atmosphere turned cold inside the Demonel Royal Conference Hall. King Hezin Luxuritania slammed his desk, demanding answers from his terrified silent subordinates. Even as Arnesia's contraband flooded the borders, the king discovered his own banquets were drowning in foreign luxury. Clutching his head in pure agony, Hezin Luxitania spiraled while his right-hand man, the purple-haired Duke Elgagen, kept his cool. While the Duke urged patience, the three advisors stood there like deer in headlights. Did they really not see the cliff they were approaching? The king roared a grim warning. If they didn't pivot now, their national debt would skyrocket by 2 or even 3 times. Hessen's gaze turned hollow. The economic scales between the three nations were finally tipping, and the balance was shattering. All because the masses were obsessed with the latest trends. Somewhere Errol sat atop a mountain of gold swinging, without a care. While the king shivered on his throne, the Merman Empire was already throwing a fit over their paper imports. With such bizarre production secrets, how could Hessen ever close the gap? Duke Elgigen stepped into the light with a sharp gaze. No more delays. It was time for a reckoning. The king shifted in his seat, his hand trembling with the weight of his choice. He knew Arnesia was a titan, a powerhouse that wouldn't fall easily. But the Duke simply smirked at the challenge. They didn't have to face this monster alone. Raising his hands, the Duke suggested it was time to call in some favors. With a firm grip, the Duke dropped the bombshell. They needed a grand coalition to wipe the Arnesia kingdom off the map. And so, Demonil's secret ravens took flight. Soon the Duke and several shadow-shrouded figures huddled around a flickering table. Deep within the palace's darkest dungeon, a forbidden meeting commenced. Candlelight danced off the cold stone walls as the Duke stood tall. He welcomed his guests, Grand Duke Gong of the Merman Empire and Count Marin Binstad of Sajapan. The pieces were finally moving. The tension was thick, as they noted it had been ages since they last met. Hoping this wasn't just another waste of time, the leaders cast aside their hoods. While Sajapan wasn't a superpower, their military might was legendary and terrifying. The alliance was nearly complete, yet one seat remained hauntingly vacant. The silence in the room spoke volumes. Gong and the Count eyed the empty chair. Sun Cook was a no-show. He talks big about honor, but he'll crawl here for gold. Since they were about to butcher the Arnesia Empire, there was no room for secrets. The gloves were officially coming off. It was time to talk business. Gong and Binstad nodded in grim agreement. Elgigen leaned over the table, his presence suffocating. Arnesia's explosive growth is a cancer we can no longer ignore, he hissed. Gong's expression darkened in total agreement. That's only the tip of the iceberg, Gong added. Suddenly, a man with a scarred face raised his hand, breaking the tension. Can we actually take down a giant like Arnesia? Failure means our total extinction. Elgigen marched toward the skeptical Count. Beads of sweat rolled down the Count's face. That's why we unite. No nation, no matter how godly, can withstand a combined assault. Squinting with cold calculation, the Duke explained that war would paralyze Arnesia's factories. Their production would grind to a halt. Elgigen pictured Errol's smug face. Rumor had it this young prince was the mastermind behind every revolutionary product. A genius at 8 and a savior of dying lands by 14. The boy was a freak of nature, a true prodigy. Some stories might be hype, but if they let him breathe, he'd evolve into an unstoppable monster. Arnesia's reign would be eternal. Elgigen's hand trembled before tightening into a crushing fist. The time for hesitation had passed. We either rot in fear of war, or we hunt that boy down and end this. The choice was clear. Gong and the Count shared a sinister smile. The Merman Duke spoke up, his voice dripping with newfound anticipation. The Count of Sajapan slammed his palm down, sealing the deal. These power players had been itching to humble Arnesia for years. The Duke of Demonil clasped his hands, a chilling smirk spreading across his face. Finally, they were all on the same page. The blood pact was signed. Now let's dissect the finer details of their downfall. Meanwhile, Arnesia's palace felt the first chill of winter. The king sat on his throne, sensing the shift in the air. Had those three snakes really signed a secret pact against him? Their murderous intent was blindingly obvious. Closing his eyes, the king pinched the bridge of his nose, bracing for impact. Preparation was key. He stood up, clutching a scroll, and warned that a tempest was brewing, one deadlier than the wars of the past. This wouldn't be a mere skirmish. It would make the conflict of 30 years ago look like child's play. Arnesia was ready. With tax revenue and military might surging to new heights, they weren't the same kingdom anymore. Arnesia would stand its ground. Send the orders, the king bellowed, commanding letters be dispatched to every loyal vassal. Far away, a boy sat in the grass. A girl in a purple scarf and a pointed hat watched him closely. Errol looked down at the parchment, his mind miles away. Had he pushed the world too hard? No, his path was righteous. Maya tilted her head, sensing his sudden unease. Now, 15, Errol looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. I have a really bad feeling about this, he whispered. He clutched his head as a cold shiver ran down his spine. The game was changing. He needed to find his sister immediately. Greedy shadows gathered. The Alliance fumed as Errol's skyrocketing profits threatened their absolute control. Cooperation was their only weapon. Gunn and Count Gelding watched agape as the Merman Duke plotted. Nursing a lifelong grudge against Errol, Sajapan's count, pledged a massive legion for the upcoming strike. 3 leaders locked eyes, united by a singular venomous goal, despite their mutual lack of trust. To crush the arrogant upstart, they'd play nice. Meanwhile, Errol simply smirked at his own target. War loomed over the Urnesia Empire as the unholy pact formed. Errol sat calmly within his fortress. Bathed in sunlight, he sensed the thickening malice. Nearby, a blonde girl remained silent and watchful. She scanned the headlines exposing the Triple Alliance, noting the Merman Empire's shocking betrayal. Once allies, now enemies. Kanya's mind raced, plotting a preemptive strike against their suspicious movements. A first strike seemed logical, but Errol shook his head, signaling a massive strategic hurdle. Attacking without hard evidence would brand Urnesia as the villain. He leaned in, his gaze intense. These crafty dukes wouldn't leave a paper trail. Urnesia was already lucky to even know they existed. Errol brooded over the discovery. He'd anticipated this betrayal, though it arrived 5 years ahead of schedule. It was laughable. Across every reality, the elite treated human lives as mere expendable pawns, hence the endless cycle of bloodshed. Errol rubbed his temples, visibly annoyed by humanity's thirst for violence. Peace was a pipe dream. Kania watched him worried, as they sat buried under a mountain of documents. Before confirming the worst, he probed for her next move. Confusion flickered in her eyes. Why the sudden interrogation? Faint energy radiated from her as Errol assumed she'd retreat to the palace. The king's anxious letters demanded her return. Errol casually picked his nose while Kania sat nearby. Their father's concern for his son was non-existent compared to his obsession with his daughter's safety. Sending his darling girl to the front lines was unthinkable. Errol clarified he wasn't demanding she run. He merely suggested she wait out the storm. In a crisis, her royal status outweighed her knightly duties. Her bloodline trumped her blade. Kania bristled, folding her arms as she flatly rejected his patronizing offer. Her defiance stunned him. This was no game. They were staring down a gruesome battle to the death. Was she truly ready? Kania smiled down at the young prince, her hands gripping her seat with conviction. Her grin widened. She refused to hide behind a crown, while her vow to protect Errol remained unbroken. Why should royalty flee when the kingdom bleeds? Errol blinked, seeing a fierce stranger in his sister's eyes. Faking a sob, he dabbed his eyes, marveling that his little sister had finally found her backbone. She groaned at his antics. Resigned, Errol promised to inform their father of her choice to stay. She nodded in thanks. Despite his best efforts, her stubborn will had completely overridden his logical warnings. The king pored over the message. Simultaneously, within Lord Fahelia's manor, tension hung heavy in the air. A brunette sipped her beverage. Beside her, a silver-haired beauty let out a weary soul deep sigh. War is a monster, she whispered. The silver-haired girl questioned Sina's history with actual bloody combat. Sina's cheeks burned. Those memories were buried. She'd survived 2 brutal campaigns on the deadliest front lines. Those skirmishes were child's play compared to this looming apocalypse. Doubt began to cloud her mind. It had been an eternity since she'd seen home. Her companion clutched her mug, lost in thought. Word was, her brother had just joined the academy. Perhaps she yearned for one last reunion. The timing was tragic, but she trusted his understanding. She offered a bittersweet smile over the rim. This was no holiday. Time was a luxury they lacked. They clinked mugs, a silent toast to survival. They drank to the uncertain future. Sina then turned to the purple-eyed girl, checking on her progress. Did you devour everything already? Shara whined about her hunger, while the blonde girl retorted sharply. Beer isn't a meal, you glutton. Books were stacked high on every available surface in the room. Errol sifted through his research, clutching a green tome. He'd kept his sister in the dark. His data predicted a declaration of war against Urnesia within the year. There was no, quote, avoiding it. The clock was ticking. Moving pawns, he gave the enemy a 30% victory chance. Relying on strategic instincts from his previous lives, he calculated the enemy's colossal force at 600,000 to 700,000 soldiers. 2 vibrant pawns rested on the map. Since Urnesia would be playing defense, they'd likely deploy about 600,000 troops as well. A decisive victory seemed impossible to call. Aurel swept the pawns aside, constructing a chaotic formation using various mismatched chess pieces. If things went south, he'd have to play dirty. Touching his chin, he mused that even in a worst-case scenario, survival was manageable. Everything remained under control as long as his fortress stood firm. Shutting his eyes, Aurel sank back into his plush chair. His top priority, living life exactly how he pleased. Flashing a confident wink and a broad smirk, he chuckled. This reckless young lord just needed a solid strategy to survive the upcoming carnage. 2 lonely pieces marked the map's terrain. Aurel's first move, beef up the military and crush the alliance before they even smelled his borders. He'd lock the gates so tight not even a rat could infiltrate. Meanwhile, brown boots crunched through the fresh, heavy snow. Aurel swung the heavy doors open, entering Akin's bustling workshop. Suddenly, a stray tool whizzed dangerously past his head. It was immediately clear Akin was having a total meltdown today. Aurel simply waved at the grumpy old blacksmith. An axe quivered in the wood right behind him. "Welcome to Philia," he chimed in with a cheeky delay. He checked if Akin lacked supplies. The silver-haired smith nodded, praising the elite equipment and suspiciously fancy facilities provided. Aurel inquired what had triggered such a massive tantrum from the old master. Akin shot him a death glare, shoving a heavy hammer toward his throat. The local smiths were incompetent hacks who couldn't follow orders. Pure fury burned in the old man's eyes. He hadn't slept for 48 hours because of those idiots. Aurel tried interceding. Ordinary humans couldn't possibly match a master's insane tempo. Akin slumped onto a stump, an anvil looming behind him. At least he'd unlocked some useful secrets about billet. The recipe was surprisingly simple. Aurel called that a win. He warned Akin not to mess up the ratios. Akin clutched his head as Aurel finally revealed his real motive, a massive order. Production needed to start now. Akin grunted that simple designs were doable for his team to handle. He asked for the specific quantity. Aurel leaned in, whispering the number. Instantly, Akin's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. Aurel just maintained a playful grin. He stood by the exit, arms wide, before sprinting out the door. Another tool soared past as Akin roared that the boy was absolutely losing his mind. The enraged old man had to be held back by another blacksmith. "Chill out," the man begged, but Akin was fuming. Armor for 20,000 soldiers. Did Aurel think he was a god? Aurel wiped cold sweat from his brow outside. At this rate, the old man might actually kill him. He'd need to tread carefully, though. He knew the master would deliver. Cut to 3 suited men, one draped in a lavish white fur coat. The merchant never expected Aurel's return. He greeted his special VIP client, Prince Aurel. With a suave smile, Aurel admitted he hadn't planned on returning so soon either. The clerk was floored by the prince's letter. He wasted no time asking exactly how many slaves the lord required. Sporting a slight grin, Aurel declared this would be his most massive haul yet. The fur-coated man rubbed his greedy palms together. A bead of sweat trickled down the merchant's face as he assured the prince he knew exactly who he was dealing with. Aurel flashed 5 fingers. 50,000 men, 10 times the previous order. Could the trader handle it or not? The slave trader broke into a cold sweat, stammering out a shaky response to the absurd demand. He breathed nervously until Aurel pressured him. "What's the holdup? Are you out of stock?" Offended, the trader explained that noble demand was peaking. Everyone wanted slave soldiers. 3,000 had already been snatched up this week. Aurel apologized for the rush, questioning if the trader really planned to use all 50,000. The trader clarified that they wouldn't all be his. He and his families would buy them up, just like before. 50,000 was just a rough estimate based on his math. Standing beside the frantic merchant, Aurel remained ice cold. After some thought, the trader sighed. "I get it, Mr. Aurel. You're the boss." Aurel knew this vulture only cared about gold, but with an army, safety was certain. He figured the trader was just playing hard to get to hike up the final price. Locking eyes with him, Aurel snapped that he hated wasting time. The trader instantly beamed, agreeing that efficiency is everything. Aurel ordered the slaves sent to his estate immediately. How long for all 50,000? The trader estimated 5 days. Aurel bid him farewell, promising to show up personally in 5 days to collect his new army. Shocked, the trader warned that would be a logistical nightmare, offering to deliver them himself instead. Aurel shrugged, insisting he'd meet her at the gates while wearing a devious little smirk. 5 days remained to prep everything, but the mountain of work ahead felt nearly impossible to climb. Taking the reins, Aurel peered into the carriage where Kania sat, fully intending to join his journey. Skepticism clouded her face as she questioned if another 5-day absence would truly be all right. Looming over the carriage door, Aurel's sole mission was keeping her suspicion completely buried. He needed a distraction before she became a liability. Kania finally gave a reluctant nod. "We'll finish this later," she warned. Sensing an opening, Aurel proposed a stroll through the capital. The idea stunned her. He suddenly recalled that his sister was a princess, sheltered from the world. Trapped by war rumors and palace walls, her lifelong curiosity about the outside world finally bubbled over. Yearning for freedom, Kania hesitantly asked what exactly this city tour would entail. Grinning, Aurel joked that a walk beat rotting indoors since they had nothing better to do. His bluntness struck a chord. After a tense silence, Kania offered her hand in silent agreement. "Only this once," she whispered. Thrilled, Aurel helped her descend, his mood instantly soaring. The streets erupted with energy. Market vendors hollered desperately, fighting for every passerby's attention. Navigating the bustling square, Kania marveled at the reality that shattered her sheltered expectations. This is just the start, he teased, urging his sister to stay close before they found food. Errol hovered behind her, clutching a fried lizard on a stick with visible disgust. But the moment Kania bit into the grilled meat, her eyes widened at the delicious flavor. Passing a majestic fountain, Kania asked for their next stop. Errol handed her the reins. They halted before a building where a massive buzzing crowd immediately piqued Kania's interest. She pointed eagerly while Errol polished off his ice cream. The sign read, "Exclusive Goods." Created by the third prince, the silver-haired sage, Kania gasped, recognizing his legendary work. Errol froze in pure horror. Seeing that cringeworthy title, he barked out that it was utter nonsense. The silver-haired sage again, he fumed. Who actually believed these scams were his creations? Burning with second-hand embarrassment, Errol tried in vain to stop Kania from entering the shop. She ignored his please be lining for a sword display, while a huffing Errol struggled to keep up. Blades lined every inch of the walls as a high-energy salesman rushed to greet them. He boasted that they'd found the best stock, swearing every blade was forged by legendary dwarves. While he hyped up a 10% discount, Errol's gaze locked onto a single suspicious sword. "That's a total lie," Errol deadpanned. "Dealing fake dwarven steel was a death wish." The seller doubled down, but Kania stepped forward with her hands on her hips, sensing the fraud. "Sister, channel a tiny bit of mana into it," Errol instructed. Kania gripped the hilt tightly. Curiosity piqued, she flooded the metal with energy. A purple glow erupted under the seller's terrified gaze. Errol didn't flinch. He knew the truth. Suddenly snap, the blade shattered like cheap glass. With a smug grin, Errol explained that fakes can't handle raw aura. The salesman turned pale. The man stammered excuses, but Errol countered, suggesting they visit the real dwarves nearby. "If I am wrong, I will pay," Errol challenged. The seller folded instantly, begging for mercy. Snatching a dagger, Errol declared he'd take it as compensation to bury the whole incident. Kania looked lost while the seller hesitated. Errol's eyes narrowed. "Got a problem with that?" The man cringed, stuttering that everything was perfect. He practically thanked Errol for the mercy. They exited the shop with Errol brandishing the dagger like a prize. Kania examined the weapon curiously. "You like that?" she asked. Errol shrugged, confident this humble blade was the only genuine item there. He suddenly pressed it into her hands. "It's yours. A gift." Kania stood there, totally stunned. Her heart raced. Clutching the dagger, she raised it toward the sky with a brilliant, joyful smile. Blushing, she whispered her thanks, feeling truly seen. Errol just smiled, swaggering along with carefree ease. She's beaming like she just scored a legendary gown. His sister truly is a rare gem in this world. She flutters her lashes, stunned by the wild gift. Days later, Errol hits the castle gates with 50,000 slaves in tow. Kania leans closer, whispering that this might be overkill. A surprised Errol asks what the issue is, then challenges her to envision a new reality. Imagine leading 20,000 warriors into the heat of battle. Suddenly, Kanya sees herself clad in gleaming steel plate, grasping a legendary blade with an unstoppable army at her back. The sheer power of the vision hooks her instantly. She gives a sharp, determined nod. Meanwhile, at the entrance, Asai, Sina, and Daya are catching up. Asai suggests welcoming the prince. Sina smirks, admits it's been ages since they last saw his face. But as they reach the threshold, pure chaos greets them. Sina and Asai freeze their jaws, hitting the floor. Their expressions contort in total shock, while Daya remains unfazed. Simultaneously, they shout the exact same confused question. Errol stands there, grinning a sea of people stretching behind him. With a laugh, he boldly declares his triumphant return. He's brought 50,000 new souls home. Like a rising tide, Errol and his massive crowd flood the courtyard. Asai facepalms, groaning that she saw this coming. They definitely should have kept him on a shorter leash. Sina is speechless, panicking at the sheer scale of the mob. Even the stoic Daya looks slightly shaken by the head count. She wonders how they'll even afford the groceries. Nearby, someone snickers that food is always her top priority. Asai confronts Errol, noting that while war is coming, maybe hiring actual professionals would be a smarter play. Errol scoffs with casual cool. War might be distant, but enemies will always be lurking, waiting to strike. They'll try to tear Fahelia down. Noticing their long faces, Errol tells them to just trust his vision. After all, his track record is flawless. Asai ignores his cocky smirk and reluctantly drops her protest. Errol flashes a thumbs up, grateful for her backup. Then he gestures to the massive horde behind him. He needs them to whip these people into shape, forging them into the ultimate Fahelian war machine. The blueprint forms in his mind. Scout the talent, organize the squads, and begin the brutal grind of training. He'll draft the master manual, then leaves the heavy lifting to the girls. Bathed in golden light, Asai and Sina vow to handle it without a second thought. Watching them, Errol knows everything is falling into place. His schedule is about to get hectic. He pictures the three allied kings mocking their arrogance from afar. They think he's a joke. Let them play their games. He'll be the one putting them in their place. Errol treks across the wild plains with Daya in tow. The ascent is brutal, and halfway up, Errol starts venting. Why are mages obsessed with mountain peaks? Daya leaning on her crutch deadpans that they're just stuck in the past. The new generation prefers the urban neon. As sunset paints the hills, Daya admits she's a city girl at heart. The mountains are a snooze fest with zero good snacks. Errol can't help but vibe with that logic. He finds her priorities hilarious. Deep in a dusty library, a sharp-eyed professor looks up from his work. It's been ages since this trio last crossed paths. The professor wonders what trouble brought them to his door. Errol holds up a finger, playing it cool. He's just looking to make a little purchase. But he warns it's no ordinary request. As curiosity peaks, a glowing blue gem hovers between them. Errol needs a high-tier mono-storage stone, an A-class relic minimum. The mage notes that such items are rare. They're usually locked down by the magic tower. Glare adjusts his spectacles, questioning why Errol is coming to him. Errol knows the old man's playing dumb. He drops the truth: the tower has blacklisted him from buying. Errol remains stone-faced. The professor probes for his motive. While mages are human, their artifacts are world-shaping weapons. In the theater of war, these relics change the rules. The scholar fixes his gaze, as Errol pleads for understanding. He just wants to safeguard his home. The mage senses his sincerity, but why stick his neck out for this? Errol flashes a knowing grin, making the universal sign for profit. He knows the professor is far too sharp to miss the play. And as history shows, Errol always settles his tabs. The scholar ponders as Errol maintains his confident smirk. Beneath that ego lies a greedy soul who smells a golden opportunity. Finally, the man admits it won't be fast. Errol beams perfectly fine with a little wait. Later, deep in the woods, Errol lets out a long stretch. One more crisis averted. He'd been grinding non-stop, and finally it was time for some well-deserved R&R. Suddenly, Daya dropped to her knees beside him. Errol watched her, completely baffled by her erratic behavior. Daya couldn't stop obsessing over the mage's price tag. It was pure robbery, but Errol told her to relax. He claimed his pockets were deep. Leaning in, he whispered a secret that made Asai freeze in pure shock. He'd just revealed the true scale of his wealth. Gripping her shoulders, Errol dropped another massive bombshell. This didn't even include the queen's looted stash. No worries, he smiled. Now let's head back to the castle. Later in Felilia, Errol slammed a blueprint onto the mage's table. Gentlemen, he announced, the real grind begins now. This was a high-stakes mission. As a mage scanned the draft with trembling hands, Errol began his breakdown. Everything had to be finished before the war erupted. This was top-secret intel. Absolute silence was strictly mandatory. Terror washed over the mages. With a devious grin, Errol introduced them to the brutal world of unlimited overtime. Naturally, the pay would be legendary. He urged them to stay strong. This sacrifice was for their survival too. Afterward, Errol strolled through the bustling capital, hands clasped behind him like a man without a single care. Asai followed closely in his shadow. When she questioned his visit, he simply claimed he needed the fresh air. Pulling her along, Errol casually mentioned the shadow deals he'd been closing while the world prepped for war. Asai broke into a cold sweat, visibly shaken. They halted near the Golden Gate as Errol pointed toward the horizon. Behold the Imperial Academy. This 4-story fortress was where Asai's little brother spent his days hitting the books. Errol insisted she pay him a visit. Pushing the gates open, he revealed the elite sanctuary for the Empire's brightest. It was a royal-vetted hub for noble heirs. While the elite hire private tutors, this is where legacies are forged. Most blue bloods still ship their kids here. Errol dropped a suggestion that made Asai instantly try to protest. He shut her down immediately. Every vacation offer was met with excuses. Did she really want to dodge her brother? Gazing at the dirt, she argued, the prince shouldn't tag along. Errol just laughed, telling her to stop being stubborn. He wasn't a heartless boss. Flashing a VIP pass with a crimson seal, he revealed he'd already rigged the visit. Asai stood there speechless. Atop an academy bridge, Errol scanned the sea of wealthy students roaming below. It hit him he knew zero about Asai's sibling. Kicking back with his hands behind his head, he sought answers. So where's the kid? Errol asked. Closing her eyes, Asai confessed she didn't have his exact coordinates, but in this crowd, she'd spot him instantly. After all, everyone said he was basically her twin. A blonde boy clutching a green notebook caught Errol's eye. Is that our target? He asked, pointing him out. Shock hit them both. Asai recognized the boy instantly, his name escaping her lips in a sudden gasp. So that's Ares, Errol noted. 3 girls were cornering him by the window, their glares sharp and intimidating. One girl demanded an answer to her offer. Trembling, Ares stammered that he'd thought about it, but things were complicated. Errol was baffled. Even here, bullies existed. He stepped forward to intervene, but Asai held him back, wanting to wait. The trio finally vanished. As Ares exhaled and straightened his tie, Asai lunged forward, gripping his shoulder tight. She demanded the truth. Ares stared back, his brain short-circuiting at the sight of his sister inside the academy. Those girls were clearly up to something. So much for his letters, claiming everything was perfectly fine. Looking terrified, Ares hugged his notebook tight. Asai pushed harder, desperate to know what those girls were after. He stayed silent. Confused, she slumped beside him. Errol watched, amused he'd never seen the cool Asai this rattled. Telling her to chill, Errol took over. He approached Ares, placed a firm hand on his shoulder, and introduced himself. Ares' eyes went wide. The third Prince Errol chuckled, telling him to leave the formal titles at the door. He leaned in close. Spill it. Is someone giving you trouble? He meant the girl who was bothering him. Ares insisted it wasn't like that. Errol made a bro promise to keep the secret from his sister. Drenched in sweat, Ares cracked. The girl was Haya Kurt, the youngest daughter of the powerful Marquis Kurt. That name rang a bell. Stroking his chin, Errol recalled meeting the silver-haired Marquis at a party. He'd seemed decent enough. Errol pondered this as Ares shut his eyes, looking like he wanted to vanish. So, a noble brat was messing with his bodyguard's brother. Ares looked away, finally ready to spill the tea. He flashed back to being pinned against the wall. Errol urged him to talk fast as the memory intensified. Lady Kurt had cornered him, flashed a wicked grin, and demanded Ares date me. The boy wanted to weep. Errol froze in absolute disbelief after her confession. Pen in hand, he watched as Ares turned bright red from pure embarrassment. He had bolted while screaming that 11 was way too young for romance. Unsurprisingly, Lady Kurt did not take that rejection lightly. Errol processed the chaos as Ares quietly sniffled nearby. Despite a clear refusal, the girl refused to stop her relentless pursuit. She was not the only one, though. Ares gloomily recalled how every girl in class treated him like some adorable little mascot. They were constantly hovering and patronizing him. Ares clarified it was not exactly bullying, but it definitely felt suffocating and weird. It was just overwhelming. Errol sighed heavily, realizing Ares was completely oblivious to his own massive popularity among the students. Just pondering middle school drama was draining Errol's energy. Looking away, Ares confessed he was totally lost on how to handle it. Suddenly, Errol gestured toward a figure and suggested a direct confrontation. Ares jumped frantically, asking how long she had been standing there. Had she heard everything? She claimed she had returned because her message for Ares was not quite finished yet. Before continuing, she demanded to know who the strangers were. Errol rubbed his neck, assuring her they were not anyone shady or dangerous. He then gestured at Asai, boldly introducing Haya as her future sister-in-law to everyone's absolute shock. Asai stood there speechless, demanding an explanation, while Ares cringed. However, Haya simply nodded, already aware of the family connection. Recognizing Ares' older sister from rumors, Haya gave a polite greeting. Meanwhile, Errol leaned over to whisper some schemes into Asai's ear. Introducing herself as Haya Kurt, the youngest of her prestigious house, she bluntly stated her true intentions right there. She intended to date Asai's little brother. Asai was floored, but Errol just smirked, loving the girl's fearless and direct attitude. Utterly baffled, Asai looked to Errol for guidance. He reasoned that since their families were not enemies, why make things complicated? Why not let the kids handle their own hearts? Asai argued back, reminding him that Ares felt pressured by her advances. Errol countered, noting that Ares never actually mentioned hating her. He just seemed overwhelmed and unsure of his own feelings. Errol then pointed out the Kurt family's legendary reputation for building massive wealth through incredibly sharp and strategic financial investments. A union with her could secure their family's future. However, Asai's expression darkened, clearly hating that Errol was being so cold. She loathed the idea. Errol quickly pivoted, suggesting they just observe and see if genuine feelings actually blossomed between the two. Let us see where this goes. Asai agreed, but had one burning question. If Haya was so great, why did Ares keep running? Why the constant rejection? Errol speculated it was just boyish pride, though he suspected a deeper hidden reason was at play. Suddenly, a green-haired boy stormed toward the pair. Fuming with rage, he immediately began screaming at the top of his lungs. Accusing Ares of relentlessly hitting on Lady Kurt, Lucian demanded to know how a nobody like him dared to pursue her. Haya immediately shielded Ares, snapping that she was the one doing the chasing. Lucian's face turned scarlet as he roared in protest. He absolutely would not allow it. He demanded to know why she chose Ares over him. Errol smirked. A classic love triangle appeared. The drama was escalating fast. Lucian ranted about Ares' crumbling family, and how his sister had been reduced to a common laborer. He screamed that dating a peasant-tier noble would disgrace her house. Errol's eyes narrowed. This little pest had finally crossed the line. Ares demanded he stop disrespecting his sister and Haya. This only fueled Lucian's rage, causing him to throw a wild, desperate punch. Errol effortlessly caught the strike coldly, suggesting a change of topic. He warned Lucian that sticking his nose where it did not belong might result in him losing it entirely. Lucian snarled back, demanding to know why this complete stranger was meddling in their business. Since no outsiders were invited, he should not be here. Errol smirked, stating that unlike Lucian, he actually had a formal invitation. Right then, another figure approached the group. A green-haired man stepped forward sternly, asking what all the chaotic noise was about. Errol was already fed up with the growing audience. Lucian's eyes instantly brightened the second he recognized his older brother arrival. Errol noted the newcomer looked more like a strict professor than a student. The man turned his cold gaze toward Errol, questioning his identity. Errol smirked, having anticipated that exact moment. With a graceful mocking bow, he prepared to reveal his true status to the crowd. He introduced himself as the third prince of the Arnesia kingdom and Fahelia rightful lord. The man instantly froze in pure terror. Panicked over a prince's presence, he awkwardly suggested they move to a private room to continue their high-stakes discussion properly. Moments later, they were settled inside. The green-haired man bowed deeply, apologizing for his brother, incredibly rude and bratty behavior. He promised Lucian would offer a formal apology soon. This was Cadol Lucian, the prestigious heir of his noble family line. As a fencing instructor at the academy, he held authority. Errol coldly stated the apology belonged to Ares, not himself. Cadell dryly dismissed Errol's claim. In his twisted view, Ares was the instigator, making him the one who owed an apology. He blamed the Purnell family entirely. Asai was floored by the audacity, insisting that her brother had not done a single thing wrong. Errol had puzzled over how this petty love triangle began, but the ugly truth was finally starting to become crystal clear. Forget textbooks, the Royal Academy is actually a high-stakes social battlefield where young elites trade lessons for political alliances. Errol sensed the boy was merely a family puppet. Even the most noble goals can rot into something toxic over time. Cadell sneered that the Carrot and Lucien bond was ancient history, making the Purnells nothing but unwanted intruders. Errol's blood boiled. That a teacher would dismiss the Purnell family as a mere annoyance was beyond insulting. Slamming his hands down, Errol stood tall and crushed Cadell's pathetic lies with cold, hard facts. Closing the gap, he questioned why bloodlines mattered for friendships. Was the Academy actually teaching pure discrimination these days? Unfazed Cadell argued that rank is everything. To him, social climbing was a noble's ultimate sacred duty. Errol dropped a bombshell. Did Cadell forget Asia was his personal knight? Was he really looking down on a royal guardian? Visible cracks appeared in Cadell's ego. He hurried toward the exit, vowing to warn his brother about this mess. He threw a final warning, telling the Purnells to stay in line to avoid any unfortunate misunderstandings. Knowing Cadell's schemes wouldn't stop, Errol barked a command to freeze. Cadell's face instantly drained of all color. With a playful smirk, Errol noted Haya's interest in Ares. Cadell's brother was just an annoying third wheel. He suggested an old-school noble solution. After all, a classic challenge is the fastest way to resolve romantic drama. Silence gripped the room. Cadell and Asia were speechless. Was Errol seriously suggesting an official duel? Exactly. It was time for a showdown. The Purnell's elite daughter against the Lucien family's eldest son. Even the siblings would clash. Cadell tried to laugh it off, but Errol's piercing gaze signaled he wasn't finished. A win for Cadell meant Errol would back off. Better yet, he'd solve their family's desperate post-harvest famine. Cadell was floored. But Errol upped the stakes. Asia and Ares both needed to win for a total Purnell victory. If just one Lucien fighter triumphed, they'd win it all. The odds were incredibly stacked in Cadell's favor. It seemed reckless, but the potential rewards were massive. Cadell's ego swelled. He was certain they couldn't lose. His brother had the age and size advantage. Plus, as a former 13th Order officer, Cadell felt absolutely invincible. Crushing a simple guard seemed like child's play. Bowing low, Cadell accepted the prince's generous, if foolish, offer. Grinning, Errol staked the legendary Arnesia honor on the deal. This was now an official, unbreakable royal promise. Asia's patience finally snapped. She screamed that while she usually tolerated his wild antics, this was total insanity. This crossed a major line. Errol just teased her, noting that her grumbling was basically her normal routine. Asia fired back, but Errol's tone shifted. He knew he was pushing it, but could she really stomach Cadell's insults? She wavered. Errol reminded her that Cadell had dragged her family name through the mud and bullied little Ares. Was she okay with Ares being treated like trash? She argued that as his guard, personal vendettas were forbidden. Fair point. But Errol countered that disrespecting his knight was a direct, unforgivable slap to his own face. He wouldn't stay silent while his people were mocked. This duel was officially the beginning of the Lucian's downfall. With a devilish grin, he asked if she was itching to crush that arrogant worm. Errol was absolutely loving this. He suggested she show Ares what a legendary knight she really is. Asia stiffened, then released a heavy sigh. She finally relented. But Ares immediately started spiraling, whining that there was no way he could defeat a Lucien. Errol couldn't fathom the drama over a simple schoolyard scrap. Just go out there and end it, he commanded. Ares kept spiraling. Suddenly, Errol gripped his shoulders, his gaze turning sharp. Give me the straight truth, he demanded. Does that punk always push you around? Doesn't it make your blood boil? Shaking, Ares finally nodded. Yes. He feared ruining his sister's hard work to save their family name. He simply couldn't afford to be reckless. Ares believed enduring the humiliation was his only path to power. Errol shrugged. That's one way to live, I guess. But when does the suffering end? Errol pushed. He grilled the boy so intensely that Ares nearly broke down. Waiting means losing. Errol warned him that some enemies must be crushed immediately before the chance vanishes forever. If he kept waiting for a perfect moment, he'd just rot in the shadows. Success doesn't favor the hesitant. He lit a fire in the boy's heart. This was his moment to prove that nobody crosses a Purnell. He wasn't suggesting Ares become a mindless brawler that's a recipe for disaster. But this specific fight, that's different. This time he wasn't alone. He had the full, terrifying might of the third prince backing him up. Smirking, Errol tossed an arm over the boy's shoulder and marched him toward his inevitable destiny. The words hit home. Ares' eyes shimmered with newfound fire, his spirit finally igniting. Errol smirked, satisfied. His gambit was flawless. Leaning in, he began outlining a lethal strategy to secure Ares' victory. Make no mistake, Errol murmured. Duels aren't noble, they're just socially sanctioned savagery. It's state-sponsored violence that draws vultures and endless rumors. Errol let out a dark chuckle. From toddlers to the elderly, everyone was bloodthirsty. He kicked back and took his seat. Haya stomped over, fuming that they'd arranged a duel without her. Errol offered a half-hearted apology. He claimed they just needed to humble Lucian. Haya's eyes flashed. She definitely supported that. Yet she worried. This was reckless, especially since Ares was a complete novice with a blade. Ares scoffed at the doubt. For Errol, technical swordsmanship was the least important factor here. Haya froze, arguing that skill is everything in combat. Errol simply brushed her concerns aside. Ares gripped his wooden sword ready. Cunning beats talent every single time, Errol whispered coolly. He promised she'd see soon. Then he teased why she chose Ares over the superior Lucian. Haya gushed about how Ares was totally adorable, catching Errol off guard. When she pinched him, he looked like he might burst into tears. She thrived on that reaction, craving more pinches. Blushing, she joked about devouring him. Errol shuddered, truly terrified by Lady Kurt's twisted thoughts. He considered stopping the madness, but the judge with royal blessing declared the duel officially open. The command was given. Start. Lucian instantly lunged at Ares like a predator on prey. Die. Lucian screamed. Haya gasped in horror while Errol began weaving his subtle magic. Half step back, dodge right, Errol commanded telepathically. Ares moved perfectly narrowly, avoiding the strike. Instructions flowed like water. Lucian's swings hit nothing but air. Ares was soon panting, exhausted. Still, he obeyed every word. With one precise thrust, he sent Lucian crashing to the dirt. Silence fell. The kids stared, stunned that the underdog hadn't been touched. Haya finally breathed. Errol grinned, reveling in the chaos as he beamed directions straight into Ares' mind. Using a secret mana link, he exploited Lucian's telegraphing. The bully's moves were painfully amateur. These kids fought exactly like their tutors taught them. To Errol, it was like reading a textbook. Good boy, Errol praised. Keep following my lead. Ares was drained, but his resolve held firm. Lucian scrambled up, howling in rage. He couldn't accept being humbled by a mere brat. With a guttural roar, he lunged for blood. Ares panicked, but Errol's voice remained cold and steady. Duck low, then strike upward. This was it. Ares executed the move with perfect timing. Haya's jaw dropped. Ares' sword connected right between Lucian's legs. Lucian collapsed instantly, blacking out. Even the ref stood frozen before declaring Ares Purnell the victor. Easy work, Errol remarked dryly. Kaito walked past, muttering about his brother's inevitable loss. Errol's mocking tone was purely savage. Errol played the innocent fool. Kaito sighed, noting he should have expected Errol's dirty tricks. Then Isaiah and Kaito stepped up. Kaito vowed that by any means necessary, he would win. Ares sprinted back, shouting in triumph. Errol gave him a nod of approval for a job well done. Haya pounced on him, squeezing his hands while squealing that she never doubted his victory. Errol watched with pure cringe. Ares' joy vanished as he remembered his sister was up next. He trembled. Kaito was a legend who once led the Order of the 13 Knights. Errol confirmed it. Kaito's confidence was sky high, but it didn't matter. Isaiah was on a completely different level. The prince draped an arm over Ares, pointing at the ring. Watch her carefully, he instructed. Errol bragged that his sister's knight title wasn't for show. Kaito warned Isaiah he was going all out. He begged her to show no mercy, then charged with everything he had. Kaito was no amateur. He wanted to lose with honor at least. Then boom. Isaiah's single punch sent him soaring. He hit the wall at terminal velocity, knocked cold instantly. Isaiah sighed, looking completely bored. She claimed she tried to take it seriously, but Kaito had zero defense. Isaiah then asked Errol for a warning. Errol smirked, joking about future schemes. He assured her that her brother had finally earned the respect he deserved. Thumping his chest, he winked at Ares. After today's slaughter, nobody would dare disrespect him again. Regarding the Lutz family, Errol promised to silence them personally. He told Izai to chill and let him handle the dirty work. She mentally noted to thank Errol soon. Meanwhile, Errol mused that people's first instinct during a crisis is pure denial. Denial is human nature. Officially, Ernesia's lords began drafting and drilling troops bracing for a potential bloodbath. Yet their movements were hesitant. What if they fully mobilized for a war that never actually arrived? Hoarded supplies and steel would rot in silos, creating a massive logistical nightmare. To put it simply, it was a massive headache. This fueled the haters criticizing the Lord for making early moves. Errol didn't budge. He demanded they prep for total war regardless of the cost. Uncertainty loomed, yet life dragged on until a world-shattering report finally hit the desks. Then, cut to the Merman Empire's heart. The Emperor stood before his subjects ready to drop a massive bombshell. He asked the world, did they realize a hidden enemy was bleeding their economies dry? The crowd gasped. He accused this foe of hoarding wealth through glamorous goods and illegal paper trade, exploiting the Empire's pride. Fist trembling, the Emperor spat his next words with pure venom. Their audacity was unforgivable. He unsheathed his blade, roaring that the villain hailed from Arnesia. For peace, he vowed that every wronged ally would brandish their steel against this common scourge. The King of Daemania and Sajapon's Grand Duke flanked him. Their blades crossed in a grim pact. The Emperor proclaimed their triple alliance would deliver divine judgment upon Arnesia's sins. Cheers thundered as the kings united. Soon after, an ultimatum arrived at the palace gates. It demanded Arnesia cease all paper production and dismantle their factories to save innocent lives. They wanted the secret formula's shared profits and for Prince Errol to be exiled for study. A blatant attempt to neutralize Errol. The Emperor's blood boiled. They dared to bully his kingdom. War was inevitable. He mobilized the legions, roaring that this sacred land was bought with ancestral blood. They wouldn't yield an inch. Our focus shifts to the border, the iron-walled fortress of Bizion. Soldiers scrambled to the ramparts. The Three-Kingdom Alliance. They're finally here, someone whispered in dread. Back at Arnesia's heart, the prince turned sharply. Report. What have the scouts spotted? A scout gasped that 100,000 enemy troops were massing on the northeastern border, ready to strike. He knew that was just the vanguard. The real nightmare was still coming. As the Empire's heir, he had to stop this onslaught. The prince stood tall, vowing that unity was their only shield. Fear was not an option. They'd reinforced the gates so tightly, not even an ant could squeeze through. The war was on. Yet Errol hadn't mobilized. Philia held its collective breath, waiting for the storm. Meanwhile, the Lord was cooking. He lifted a silver lid before Daya, revealing a succulent roast. He grinned, telling her to unleash her inner chef. Daya's eyes sparkled as she drooled over the meal. A heavenly rabbit stew simmered before them. Errol took a bite, declaring it absolutely fire. Most people would lose their appetite if they knew it was rabbit, he joked. Daya just shrugged. They've clearly never been desperate enough to eat bugs or toxic fungi, she countered. Satisfied, Errol asked if she wanted more. Daya looked up, curious about his next creation. Noticing the flour and dried fruit, she guessed he was whipping up something sweet. Trade secret, Errol winked. Daya watched him baffled that a High Lord had such elite kitchen skills. Most nobles avoided kitchens like the plague, but Errol flexed that these recipes were his own inventions. He designed every product they sold. Then he confessed a secret he once considered a simpler life. If his plans failed, he would have disappeared to become a chef. Finally, he pulled the tray out. Order up, Daya took a bite, eyes widening. It was delicious though, definitely a calorie bomb. Eat too much and you'll gain weight fast, she teased. Errol explained these were actually military rations. Standard field rations taste like trash. If things went south, Errol wanted food he'd actually enjoy eating. An officer timidly pointed out that Errol hadn't signaled the march. Errol just rubbed his neck with a clueless grin. He insisted on perfecting their drills first, his eyes gleaming with a stubborn, frantic determination to be ready. Time was a luxury he desperately sought. Yet beyond the gates, the world was already drowning in blood. Steel bit into steel, while invaders swarmed the ramparts like ants. Counterattack, now the prince roared over the chaos. Rage boiled over the missing backup, but desperate soldiers promised him help, was racing toward the front lines. Gravity favored the climbing horde, making a strike nearly impossible. Suddenly, a scout burst through the madness, gasping. He clutched a dire report. A massive new legion was closing in, numbering 210,000 strong. The prince's heart stopped at the sight of the endless horizon. This wasn't a skirmish. It was an extinction. Their arrival was impossibly fast. Meanwhile, within the Arnesia Empire's council chamber, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The emperor slumped at the table, his face etched with fatigue as his advisors barked and bickered incessantly. Fury pulsed as reports showed the enemy ranks swelling endlessly. His generals claimed victory was just a heartbeat away. Before total annihilation, a lone voice cut through the noise, screaming that a tactical retreat was their only salvation. Protect the crown, a green-haired official urged. Sensing the walls closing in, the annoyed emperor finally gave the nod. He commanded a full withdrawal, insisting the populace be warned. The shadows of war had finally reached their door. Rising with authority, he gestured toward the horizon, summoning every able-bodied lord and noble to arm themselves for battle. Total mobilization was declared. Ariel watched in awe as his elder brother stepped forward to join the meat grinder. Usually royalty stayed safe in golden cages, but his brother was trading a crown for a bloody sword. An unexpected summons yanked Errol from his thoughts. Facing a 3-to-1 disadvantage was already a literal nightmare scenario. Numbers didn't lie, and they looked grim. Errol stood, declaring he was done playing games with this chaotic mess. To save his home, he'd shed his rank and blend into the ranks as a common, nameless soldier. With the manor guarded, Errol donned his gear. He gave Fry, his loyal eagle, a gentle farewell pat. "Our true hunt begins," he whispered. Seeing Kania nearby, Errol gently suggested she remain in the safety of home. Kania snapped, her pride wounded. She refused to sit idle while the world burned and everyone else tasted battle. Her stubbornness was legendary. Her blade was lethal, sure, but who in their right mind sends family into hell? Heading to the front lines, he suspected their father would likely force her to guard their ancestral lands instead. Suddenly, Kania's hands gripped his shoulders. Her eyes softened as she thanked him for his overprotective brotherly heart. "You aren't going alone," she declared. If the little brother was marching to war, his big sister was too. Errol chuckled, a weight lifting from his chest. If her mind was set, he'd stop trying to fight destiny. "I have a gift for you," Errol said, unsheathing a magnificent blade and offering the hilt to Kania. Entrusted by Lady Phalia, the steel gleamed. It was the legendary relic passed down through the prestigious Kenzie's bloodline. Named Kelsha, after their founding patriarch, even the master dwarves spoke of its craftsmanship with hushed, reverent whispers. A treasure of such perfection was nearly impossible to replicate. Kania's voice trembled. Was this masterpiece truly hers now? "You're the kingdom's third sword," Master Errol reminded her. "Accept it." Kania gazed at the blade in breathless wonder. Respecting her silence, Errol slipped away quietly. It was time to make a graceful exit from the manor. Acting the gentleman, his sole focus shifted to one goal, keeping his men alive amidst the coming slaughter. To Errol, no medal mattered more than bringing his soldiers home alive.